Especially with the credits like that. I mean, it's weird when the people you taught, it's got to be like, well, Satriani's got a huge name. I was like teaching Steve Vai and then having him get huge. And it's weird seeing them both live because they both have like their own careers going with what they do, but they're so different in an interesting way. Like Satch took more of the blues route, I think. And, so his licks really resonate with me because the first time I tried to play through Flying in a Blue Dream, it was like legato hell for me. But then I got like surfing with the alien, and a lot of it was pentatonic, and I'm like, I could kind of handle it. But if I play Steve Vai, it's a whole nother universe.
Satch is much more radio friendly, much more melody centric, not so out there as like Steve Vai.
That's true. Yeah, Steve Vai is more like mystical or something.
Yeah, I mean that's why Satriani actually had songs on the radio, which very few instrumental people have had.
I try to tell my students that they don't believe me. I'm like, there was actually a couple Satriani tunes on like popular radio, like Summer Song had a video.
Yeah, and Surfing and the Alien.
Surfing was too. Okay,
I believe so.
I remember Summer Song was on for like an entire year. It was just like, how did this make mainstream radio?
Right. Other than that, and like Cliffs of Dover, what else instrumental stuff has ever made?
Yeah, I would say Gary Hoey. Remember that song he had?
Yeah,
Hocus Pocus?
Yeah.
That was big.
That's right. That was. There was a few, there was a couple back in the 70s that were instrumental stuff, but
that's true. Edgar Winter type stuff.
Frankenstein.
Okay. Yeah. Overkill did a cover of that. Oh yeah, it's wild. That's the first time I heard it was Overkill.
Oh really?
Check this out. It's my display case for pedals, but today I'm using it for Nancy Wilson's shoe.
Oh okay.
Just to keep the bit going.
Yeah. Sure.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Do you want anything to drink?
Doesn't matter. Sure, something maybe. Just
so like water. Oh shoot! You know what? I was gonna buy a bottled water for you, but I don't buy bottled water anymore.
It's fine if you have.
How about a miniature Jack Daniels?
I guess that works.
Okay. If you just sip it, there to keep your throat a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll edit this part out.
Sure.
Unless you want it.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. So wouldn't that be crazy if that came back into style, like instrumental music on like 93X or something?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was always the exception. I don't think it'll ever be mainstream on it. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'd love that because I love instrumental stuff, but most people I ever listened to, stuff like Jason Becker, Tony McAlpine,
Cacophony,
they never got radio airplay. Unless they did a song with like lyrics on, then maybe you'd get like Yngwie had a couple.
That's true. Yeah. And even Cacophony had a couple songs with vocals, I think, on Go Off, but they never really made the radio.
Yeah, they had some, but they were too out there, I think, to be on the radio. There's too much discordance.
Definitely
guitar.
Too much cacophony.
Yeah,
the whole idea, I think it was X-Ray Eyes was their big first song on that album, Go Off. You got X-ray eyes. Do you remember that one when they're in cages like this?
Yeah.
I love that album.
Yeah. I actually saw them live.
You did?
Yeah. They came to Minneapolis.
Wow. What year was that?
I don't remember, but they weren't together that many years, so it must have been pretty early.
It's like 89 or something?
Something like that,
Damn.
And I'd gotten a couple records through, Shrapnel Records through the mail, and I saw them playing at a local bar.
That's what I heard. They played small places.
Yeah, and so I was literally standing like 5 feet from like Jason Becker on stage. Was only like a foot high. Yeah, so I could reach out and touch him if I wanted to.
God.
And he's like,
I would have touched his guitar just to get the magic.
Yeah, and he was better live. Honestly, the records I liked, but live you could see. I think because he was so young, you could see the improvement. When he was playing it live, that was even better than on the records.
So you saw Marty Friedman,
yeah,
and Jason Becker in the same little bar,
yeah,
playing at the same. So was it a full band?
Yeah,
was it like a whole thing?
It was the full.
Okay,
full
I thought
band.
maybe they were doing like just 2 guitars.
Nope, it was the full band, and and definitely I'd say Jason stood out a little bit more than Marty in the show. But
was Marty still trying to find himself at the time?
Well, it was good. I mean, I said they'd already put out a couple records at that point. Okay. So, but when they both did their solos, I would just say Jason's was a little bit elevated over Marty, even though I love Marty's playing too on it. So
and then to see where Marty ended up, like I remember his Dragon's Kiss album because my friend Chris had it on CD, and I'll never forget the first time I got this gigantic boom box for Christmas.
Yeah.
It had the 3D bass button, and that was the first album I played on it. It just starts with that really cool drum fill.
Sure.
It's just so powerful. Yeah. And then I thought, what's Marty going to do, from here on out?
Right.
Joins Megadeth. Who would have ever thought that? That's crazy. And then I think the sad, tragic tale of, it's just the whole Jason Becker. I think he was in David Lee Roth.
Yeah, he was. He did one record with him, and then before they could go on tour, I believe it was, the symptoms of the ALS started kicking in to a point where he couldn't do the tour on it. So
just the timing is so...
So he never really made it big. If you got on tour and all that with David Lee Roth, he'd be much better known, I'm sure.
Yeah, he would have been like a household name, instead of just with us geeky guitar players.
Right.
That's so crazy because I heard about him trying out for the band. He stayed up all night and learned all the solos, note for note, on a cassette player or something like that.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I don't know the history of him trying out, but it would make sense. Everything was done on cassette tapes back then.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a memory I have of having a 4-track. I talk about this with a lot of people on podcasts, but I had the tempo dial that you could bring it down. It would bring it down an octave.
Sure.
And then you could at least kind of follow it because it was slow, but it was an octave lower, so everything sounded like sludge.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that a lot of the tape players that people used to transcribe music had the ability to slow them down, but it would change the pitch of the notes. Now you can digitally just recorrect it.
It's so crazy on YouTube to go 50%, and it's still the right pitch, and it's just like I'm so amazed by it. But everyone's like, "Yeah, duh."
Right.
Like, yeah, but this is not duh for me. This is a miracle.
Exactly.
So the fact that back then people were able to transcribe anything is a miracle to me.
Yeah, it's definitely much tougher back then.
Do you remember all the tab? Did you have all the tab books?
You're right. I definitely did because I got a lot of stuff. So when students asked for songs and stuff, I could pull them out.
Yeah,
but I mostly use the magazine transcriptions, like Guitar for Practicing Musicians.
Those were decent.
They were usually pretty good. So I'd usually rip the songs out and bring those. You probably remember. I would bring in the little bag a bunch of songs and a bunch of handouts and stuff. And
that's better than carrying all those magazines, right?
Right. So that way, people would have some choice because it's so hard to find decent transcriptions back then.
Yeah, for sure.
And now people, when they come to lessons, a lot of times don't even care about learning songs as much because they do it on their own.
Yeah.
They more have the questions about theory and improvising, all that stuff.
Teaching is definitely... I haven't been teaching privately since 2022 or 23, but it's changed so much when I was leaving that I knew it wasn't for me anymore. Like, I know I could still teach private if I chose to. Yeah. But it was weird. People would come in and stare at their phones. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's do it up. What do you like? What do you listen to? I don't know. It's just a lot of I don't knows. Yeah. And I started to realize that it's not the 90s anymore.
I honestly kind of like it better. It's because I just got burned out teaching so many cover songs.
Really?
On that, sitting there, and I would much rather teach people technique and theory and how.
You're more, that's you.
That's why on my YouTube channel. That's why I focused on because it's I don't want to teach people how to play whatever song is popular. I do that all the time in private lessons. I've done that for decades.
There's a million people doing that anyway.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I want to do something that's a little bit more unique and that I enjoy, basically. And teaching another whatever song's hip at the time is not something that's does anything for me.
Especially nowadays, what do people actually like?
Yeah.
I hate to sound old, but it's I feel like there's so many options now that everybody likes a little bit of everything. Yeah. Back when we were younger, it was these are my 5 favorite albums,
Well, right. There's not less to choose from because you didn't have streaming services that everything. I did actually go buy a CD.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I know myself, I discovered a lot of bands after I started doing listening to streaming because I just was too cheap to go buy CDs for every band when I hadn't ever heard them before. They weren't on the radio. And it's
we had to take a chance back in the day.
Right, exactly. And I'm not going to spend $15-18 for something that might suck.
I worked at Sam Goody. We were charging $18 for certain CDs, and people would come in, and then Best Buy showed up, and then people were like, "Oh, it's only $10 there. Let's go." All of our business dropped off.
Sure. Yeah.
We only could rely on the older people that didn't know about Best Buy. It was a real weird business model. Yeah. And then eventually it all dried up, but. I don't know. Streaming is kind of a double-edged sword. It's great to be able to get any song, but at the same time, it seems to devalue everything.
Right, and the quality isn't as good. But just being able to, I listen in the car a lot. I listen on headphones a lot when I'm working out and doing other things, and things that weren't be that practical for still records and cassette tapes and stuff.
Remember the old days, bringing boombox around everywhere you went.
Yeah, right.
Walkman.
Right, exactly. And I remember I had something like that. I used to, when I got back from GIT and needed work, I started doing adult paper route for a while. And I would do that same thing. I did put on the Walkman, put a cassette tape in, and be listening while I was, trudging through the apartments, just dropping papers and stuff.
Listening to, Racer X and just delivering the news. That's great.
Exactly. Any of that stuff,
Great definitely. Memories. Yeah, I delivered papers for a while before I started actually teaching.
Yeah.
And it was the most depressing time of my life because I would drive around by myself. I'd listen to the saddest music back then. Yeah. Because this is the grunge era, so everything was depressing as hell.
Yeah.
And I'm driving around and I'm lonely, and it's just me and a stack of papers on Tori Amos or something, in the CD player. And then you get done, and then at the end of the week you have to collect from people, and nobody wanted to pay. It was just such a silly time.
Yeah. When I was doing that's the adult one, I didn't have to collect anymore. They started doing everything. But I had one as a kid. I actually started when I was 8 years old delivering newspapers. And I was riding my bicycle around trying to collect from people. And that was always the kid.
I want my $2 or whatever.
Right. Well, back then you had to pay for the papers and then you had to collect the money. If you didn't collect the money, you just were out.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
you had to send in the amount to the newspaper company, and you got what was left over. So if you didn't collect from someone, you weren't making any money.
It kind of made you more responsible, but it's funny how they put that on your shoulders.
Right. Especially, like I said, I was 8 years old and doing this, 7 days a week, 3 in the morning on the weekends and stuff. And
is that a lost art? I mean, just the idea of kids working and doing something like cutting grass or
I don't think it's as much anymore. I mean, I don't think there's opportunity for them to even work if they wanted to, but also I would guess most kids don't have the desire to, and I don't blame them. It kind of sucks.
It seems like it, but they all seem to go to Chipotle. They all have money somehow, but it's they're not out shoveling driveways as far as I can see. Right. Maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure some still are getting jobs and doing stuff, but
the entrepreneurial kids, kids with the dads that are you're gonna figure it out yourself.
Right.
I think we need that. But every time you talk about GIT, I kind of just get nostalgic because it was a place I always dreamt of going to.
Yeah.
But then I hear stories from a lot of people, and if it's like any college, it's some people loved it and got a lot out of it. Other people are that was a huge waste of money. What did you think?
I loved it. But I started off, I knew I wanted to get better at music. That was my focus. And back then with no YouTube or any of that stuff, it was, you didn't know what to do.
What year was this?
Back in 84.
84, yeah. I mean,
that's when I graduated high school, was 84. So I started at U of M right that fall with the intention of maybe getting a degree in music because I didn't know how else to learn. I wanted to learn more. I left after 2 quarters because I did a classical private lessons, basic music theory, and a jazz improv class, and everything else was English composition, sociology, all these.
You would add a bunch of stuff to it.
Yeah, a bunch of our stuff. And the next quarter, I was actually going to be getting 1 music class, and I was having to do foreign language, all this stuff. It's
oh my God.
And I was paying for it myself out of pocket. So it's
out of your newspaper money.
Well, I was working summer jobs and stuff at that point. So so I'm not going to keep paying for and not even get music classes. So
you want to learn music, and they're teaching you German or something?
Well, it was a liberal arts degree.
Yeah,
it was a music degree. So you had to do all those common liberal arts type requirements. So I went to Voltech to do audiovisual production for a year. Really? Because I had never heard GIT. And then in the back of the magazines and spotlight columns, I kept seeing the people who,
those ads.
Well, no, they had column in, I think it was Guitar World, where they'd feature up-and-coming musicians. Yeah. And kept seeing GIT appearing in the people who sent in tapes.
Where they would pick 3 people?
Yeah, they'd pick so it's if this many good players are coming from this school, it must be a good school. Because again, you couldn't search online for it at that time.
That's true.
So I basically, before I even graduated from Voltech, I signed up to go to GIT, and you had to send an audition tape on cassette tape.
That's awesome.
On it, you had to do a written exam on it to get accepted. So they didn't accept everyone, but they were mostly, I think, looking for placement because they placed you at 12 different levels.
Okay.
So if you're good enough to get in, they would then. Number 1 was the most advanced players, and number 12 was the less advanced. But you're basically doing the same curriculum, just at different speeds.
Gotcha.
On it. So I got in and moved down to California to go there.
From Minnesota?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. That's a big
I was born
move.
in Minnesota. Yeah. So me and my girlfriend at the time from high school actually moved down and got an apartment together.
Oh wow. Was she like worried about it, or was she excited?
No, she was fine.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, once we got there, though, the job market sucked so much back then. This was like '86 on it.
Okay.
That's, I was just going to go to school and not work, but she had trouble getting a job and then retaining the job. So I ended up working at like Arby's, like 20 hours a week, plus going to school.
Doing both?
On it, yeah. Because we were so broke, didn't have money for food and stuff.
Wow. So you sneak some Arby's home?
I did. It wasn't sneak. It was basically the leftovers in the warming tray.
Okay.
The manager would be like, yeah, go ahead and take them. So I'd take them.
That's awesome.
I'd put in my freezer, microwave them next day, which isn't good. Microwave.
I've done it
food.
before, yeah. I actually
so,
threw it in the microwave with the wrapper on once, and it was sparking. Like, ooh, that's not good.
Yeah, but I loved it once I got there, because once I got there, I had the comparison of the liberal arts where, and at GIT, it was all music classes. There's nothing else required. So every class was something to do with music, and that's why.
What a dream!
Exactly. So I was going there every day, doing style classes, doing single string classes, which cover like the scales and arpeggios and stuff.
That's cool.
Like a blues class.
You walk in, the teacher has one string on a guitar. Like, oh, it's one string class. That's cool. They broke it down that much.
Yeah. So you had like a chord class, you had basic music theory class, you had, like I said, they would have a country class, a blues class, different style classes that you could do. And then the first 2 quarters was basically gain the fundamentals. That's when you were doing all the stuff like technique and theory and stuff. And then the second 2 quarters, because a year long, it was what it was back then. It was structured like a Voltec, basically. It was a certificate you got, and it was all focused on the music stuff.
Okay.
So the quarter 3 and 4 is more electives, and that's when I got to do, you could pick classes like chord melody and jazz improv and all these other things if you want. But they encourage you to go open counseling sessions, which is basically when I got to see people like Paul Gilbert, Frank Gabali, Jennifer Batten.
Oh, cool.
Because they would set aside time each week that at that time you'd get a schedule of what all the teachers' schedule was, and they would just have a room set up where anyone could walk in. It'd be like 10 o'clock to noon or something, ask questions, jam with them, do whatever you want.
Like a counselor type thing?
Yeah, and it'd just be a room of people. So, the popular ones would have maybe 8-10 people or so in the little room with them, and they would just be asking them questions and taking requests and stuff. So some of the instructors would prepare like a handout of licks and stuff that they'd give to you and come in. Some would just jam with people and answer questions, and so you could go there every week as many times as you had available.
I guess that's like one of the biggest things is to talk directly to somebody who's doing what you want to do.
Right.
That's such a
it's such an inspiration too.
Right.
Because you're saying this close to people like Paul Gilbert, Frank Gabali, Jennifer Batten, and watching them play. So, so it's not even so much the curriculum at that point. It's just seeing them play like that makes you want to go home and practice.
Definitely.
And
it's like seeing a great concert too.
Yeah, exactly.
You just get inspired.
Yeah.
Jennifer, were all of them pretty cool people? I take it.
Yeah,
okay.
They were all. Yeah. Jennifer Batten, that was before she got successful.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah, Michael Jackson and Jeff Beck and touring with them.
A lot of it was her hair, right? Everyone loved the way she looked. No, I'm just kidding.
When I took her open counseling, she had straight brown hair, wore glasses, ripped up jeans.
Funny.
It was just your average musician,
that's kind of hot, actually.
Nerdy girl. And then, with Michael Jackson, she had the huge, spiked.
Oh my gosh! She was wearing this contraption in this one video I watched. It felt like she was holding like a camera mount in the back because I think they put a camera up there or something. It was crazy looking. Yeah. And then she was doing the beat. It was so cool. But she was known for me because I never really got into her playing too much as like the tapping queen.
Yeah, she was
8-finger tapping.
Yeah, she used to do columns on the guitar magazines on tapping.
Always tapping, yeah.
And she was amazing on that. She'd run like scales and arpeggios with both hands simultaneously. So she'd be running full scales with her tapping hand and arpeggios with her tapping hand.
Ahead of her time.
And doing improvising with one or doing harmony with both of them.
That's so cool, yeah. Holding a chord and then doing some...
and kind of like, not quite to the level of like Stanley Jordan, who would amazing at doing that.
Yeah, he's scary at it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever matched him. And he came out, back in the 80s on it.
And like nobody really knows about him. It's sad.
Right, I know. It's crazy because you see people say, oh, this person's so good at tapping. It's like, Yeah.
There's levels.
Stanley Jordan was like 30 some years, 40 years ago doing
He's played piano on that thing.
Well, he literally would. Yeah.
It's like my first introduction to that, besides Van Halen, was Satriani's Midnight.
Yeah.
And Day at the Beach and all that. And I remember just being in my room, looking at the tablature in the book, just being like, "What is this? How do you even?" Because the tab looks so, like, I don't know, busy.
Yeah,
like there's so many numbers on one measure. I'm just like, and then when you work it out rhythmically, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of it's tapping arpeggios between the two hands and stuff. So you're combining the hands to create the arpeggio.
And then to get the wave feel right, to make it like
the synchronization.
I used to just put on the metronome, and every time it clicked, I would tap as hard as I could. I was like overdoing it, but I was really putting the signal to my brain. Yeah. And then when I lightened up, I would just speed up naturally, and it was tight. And I'm like, I figured something out. I think it's like this mechanical thing that works for me, at least. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's always good to just go slow and really perfect your motion, and then your speed will come and you can start relaxing once you have down the technique and such.
I think that's one of the best things you showed me early on in our guitar lessons, because I'm sure you had a lot of students, and I keep trying to. I was talking to my friend Corey the other day about it. Was it Crazy Jim's or
Crazy Jim's. Anoka Music was the official name, but most people called it Crazy Jim's. Yeah,
and then it changed to something else, right?
Well, Mr. Mark's Music is in the same spot now.
But they're two different things?
Yeah. Jim got out of the business. They closed down like early 90s because I taught there for like about 4.5 years, and then they shut down.
Crazy Jim's. Did he like go crazy from running a music store?
He had done it for like 17 years or something when he closed it down. And Mark, who is there now, was actually a repair guy living upstairs when Crazy Jim's was there. So then he kind of came down and took over. And
Mr. Marks. Yeah. That makes sense. I have just a weird memory of the whole thing, because I don't think I took lessons very long. Yeah. But I do remember going into the store, and the store felt like a pawn shop to me, sort of.
Yeah, a lot of used gear and stuff.
Yeah, and it had that pawn shop smell. And then you were teaching, I think, in the basement.
Yeah, all the lessons were in the basement. You had to walk to the back of the thing, past the fridge, and then down steps. And they only had like 3 lesson rooms.
It was real small and rickety, and it felt like I was in someone's like side office or something. Yeah, it was really a strange feeling, but it felt real homey, you know. But we were in the basement. You like have this guitar, this literal guitar behind me. I love it. Showing me, I still laugh to this day, because I'm like, you were teaching me on a 7-string, and I always wondered if that like sharpened me, because I had to really keep track of what string you were playing, because I had a 6.
Yeah, and that's part of why I kind of moved away from the 7-string is. It confused students, honestly. So a lot of times, sometimes I switch to a 6-string, and honestly, it would confuse me going back and forth all the time. Sometimes it'd throw off my spacing on what string I'm on. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not on my 6-string now, or I'm on my.
It's weird. I played it live. The Universe I had, the white one. I played it live twice, and both times I screwed up more than I ever screwed up. Because every time I was playing on E, it felt like I was on A, obviously, and it was just bizarre.
Yeah, if you've been playing on one for a while and then you switch, it's just messes with, especially if you start doing like string skipping or something. Yeah, it's like, okay, mistakes I don't normally make, I'm making because I'm confused on where I'm going.
You just see a sea of strings.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh my god, it's so bizarre. So there's a time and a place for the 7-string.
Exactly.
And that was the big thing when I'm doing my guitar collection video series now, and I did the first 6. And I included this one because I knew we were going to have our podcast. I kept saying we're going to do this, but just thinking of the history of walking into Crazy Jim's and seeing you play that guitar, just salivating, because I just would see Steve Vai, all those people that I just loved.
Sure.
In magazines, I would see this guitar, and I loved the fact that it was black and green. Yeah. Because it had that overkill kind of look,
Sure.
And later on, my metal band Sanctus would steal those colors too.
Sure.
It looks really cool under black lights.
Yeah.
And then to like get the idea, be like, I wonder if he still has the guitar. I thought you maybe sold it years ago or something.
Yeah, it was sitting unused mostly because once I got my previous guitar around like early 2000s, I just kind of stopped using the 7-string for the most part, because at that point I was just tired of switching back and forth.
Sure.
So it's mostly just staying in storage. So it's like, I'd love for you to have it rather than just, because I probably would have never sold it otherwise if it's just something random, right, for nostalgia. But it's like, you're actually going to play it. You actually have memories of it. I'm not playing it anymore. So,
and it's like the original type of, it's like the universe from the early 90s, basically.
Yeah, I think it was 1990 actually, the first year it came out. Because
incredible.
when I got it, I tried to go like Guitar Center and stuff, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't have any. We're not gonna have any for months." So I had to order it mail order. I think it was from Musician's Friend, which mail order catalog.
I can't believe that was around back then.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where I mail ordered it because I couldn't even try it out at Guitar Center. They didn't have any, and they were back ordered on it. Wow. And the funny thing is, I didn't even get it because of Steve Vai. I got it because I was liking to arrange violin and piano music and wanted the wider range octave.
Oh,
so
funny.
It wasn't even anything to do with, well, it's a Steve Vai signature. It's just like...
You just wanted more notes.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted more notes, and that was only 7-string available at that time. There
That's
really
crazy,
wasn't anything.
Man. So if there would have been 8 strings back then, would you have gone that
I
far?
might have, yeah.
Really?
I mean, now I wouldn't because I don't want to go there again. But yeah, at that time, I variously would have because that's... I was getting so frustrated with trying to arrange things that had more octaves, like a piano piece, and I'd get to the bottom or top, and I wouldn't be able to go further, so I'd have to like transpose something back an octave. And
that's crazy.
That doesn't sound right, doing that. So
yeah, so you just get a little bit extra oomph at the bottom.
Yeah, so it just can fit the notes in without having to start adjusting them and changing octaves and stuff like that.
Man, I love that concept. Yeah, and I'm just sitting here dreaming about Steve Vai covers.
Yeah.
I think he played it in, was it For the Love of God? No, he played, I think, the swirly paint one.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Not sure.
Honestly, on that.
But I just thought it would be so cool to play. Like, I didn't know that it had a low B string. And then when I really researched it to buy one, I ended up getting a white one with the pyramids.
Sure.
I should have never let that thing go.
Yeah.
But it got lost in transit because the guy who sold it to me, he's a friend. He's my friend, but he was a friend of a friend back then.
Sure.
And his mom sent it through UPS.
Okay.
Sure. No, Postal Service. Sure. But I thought it was UPS. And every day I would watch the truck show up, stop, and just go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, one time I ran out. I'm like, are you sure there's nothing in there for this address? And he's like, no, we don't see anything.
Yeah.
Later we find out that it's mailed through the post office. It got lost and it was being auctioned off.
Sure.
So my friend's mom had to go get it for me and basically save it. So
yeah.
And then I ended up selling it to my student, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So then you sell this to me and you end up getting a brand new guitar that you just showed me, but I wanted to reveal it.
Literally just got like 2 days ago on it. So
how many hours do you have on it?
Yeah, it was selling that guitar that prompted me to do it because honestly I'm just really cheap and don't.
That's a good way to be though.
So yeah, when I had the excuse of, well, I don't have this as a backup guitar anymore, and I've got some money, so let's build a new guitar. And it took me a while to get around to it, but I finally did. So,
well, you're welcome. No, I'm just kidding.
Out. Yeah. Well, yeah, it would. Might have never been created without you. So
look at that thing.
It's a Warmoth one. I recently just did a video going through all the details, but yeah, it's basically got John Petrucci signature pickups, which again I didn't get because I like him, though I do. It's more just kind of like the sound of them, so that's cool. Ebony,
that's a good reason to get them.
Fretboard.
Oh, that's ebony, huh?
Yeah, rosewood. Not rosewood. Roasted maple.
Okay.
Neck, because I wanted something that had no finish on it.
Yeah.
Because here, feel the back of that.
I was gonna say,
it's so smooth.
You notice I'm hesitant grabbing someone's guitar.
Yeah.
Like when you pulled it out, I'm just like, I know how sacred these things could be.
Yeah.
Wow, that feels really nice.
Yeah. So.
If it felt like this, I would hate it on the neck.
I know. I hate a heavy varnisher,
too, especially on hot gigs.
Yeah. I want just to feel wood.
Yeah, me too. This feels like you could still soak some of your sweat in and make it yours. It's kind of like when you play a guitar enough, it has your just parts of you in it, pieces of you in it.
Right.
This headstock too is very metal.
Yeah. Oh, what's funny too is that body. It's actually. I just picked it, not even knowing what it was, but on Warmoth's website, it's based off a Zeta Mirror 6, which was an actual MIDI controller.
Really?
On it that was only made for like a couple years, and they patterned a body off that, so it's kind of a weird body shape.
So wait, it used to be a MIDI controller type instrument?
That's what they patterned the shape of the body off of.
Oh,
on
interesting.
that. So they used that as an inspiration. And this is just a solid wood body on it, black Carina wood. The one thing I didn't think about is the spike.
Yeah.
It digs into my leg when I'm...
Oh, it does?
Well, as long as you keep it perfectly straight, it doesn't. But if you start turning, which I often do,
you get that.
It's right in my thigh.
Yeah. You can get that rounded off.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to put a pad under it.
Okay.
So it's,
I have a friend who customizes all he did my BC Rich. Yeah. And he can literally round it off. But the problem is getting it back to the glossy thing.
Yeah, exactly. So... Yeah. Otherwise, I'm completely happy with it because you can pick all the customization that you want on it.
So that's a one of a kind, basically.
Yeah. It's stainless steel frets, Arizona turquoise dots.
Sweet.
I've got separate volume and separate tones for both pickups, so I can mix them how I want.
I like that stacked dial at the bottom.
Yeah, concentric. So it's got that's the 2 tones, and then these are 2 volumes.
Okay.
So like on this, I usually play on when I'm playing clean on the middle setting that uses both of them. So I've got this is a little bit too bright for me, so I've got that turned on to about 7 on the volume and the tone, and this at 10.
Wow.
So I can really fine tune it. Which my last guitar, which is also a Warmoth one, didn't have those controls. I only put a volume knob and nothing else on it.
Yeah.
And it's like I always regretted that afterwards. It's like, okay.
No way to shape it unless you had a pedal or do it on your amp or something.
Right.
Okay.
So this way I can actually have more control on the actual guitar itself on it.
So for your style, you don't really care about locking tremolos or floating bridges.
Yeah,
or anything,
I had the floating bridge on the UV7, but it drove me crazy with the tuning and stuff of it.
It is a problem, yeah.
And I never used the bar that much anyways, so I just I haven't had a guitar with a bar since that one.
I'm surprised you never blocked that off so it didn't go off.
I think at the time I just never really thought about that. Again, this was in the 90s when you didn't have YouTube and other things to research stuff. I just never
you had nobody to like pattern off of. Really.
Right, so if you didn't have someone to suggest, I think I just never thought of it.
I think that's why I took all my old guitar magazines and I cut out all of the lessons. Do you remember they would have like the tab obviously for songs, but then they'd have lessons in there?
Yeah.
I ripped them all out and I put them all in this huge 3-ring binder because I'm like, those have gems in them.
Yeah.
You don't get.
You had all kinds of great players writing columns, like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and all these people writing columns in these magazines.
Totally. That's how I learned how to do pinch harmonics at first, was from an article.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I did the same thing. I got boxes full of stuff like that at home.
Do you like collect a lot of old magazines or just parts of them, like you were saying?
I had all the magazines, but then I started pulling all of the tab and all of the lessons, all of them, and then just kind of getting rid of the interviews and stuff. Because even though I'd read all the interviews at the time, I wasn't going to go back and necessarily reread interviews.
I do miss seeing the old ads, though. Some of them were just classic, like those old ADA ads where they always sold the same. They always had the same ads, it seemed like, but all the pink guitars and all the hot neon colors back then.
Right. Back then you had... they'd be advertising like albums you could buy, and all these, or guitar methods you could buy, and all this type of stuff.
Shrapnel had their whole page in the back where you could order all the...
And that's how I first was exposed to all those bands like Cacophony, is ordering their stuff with having never heard it.
Yep.
Just
sight unseen.
Yeah, order a bunch of records, and then what I'd do, because again being kind of cheap, with friends we'd then make cassette copies. So we'd order like one record, and one person would keep the record, the other person would get a cassette copy of it.
Oh man, that was the thing back then.
Yeah.
And people are like, no bootleg, and it's like, who's gonna stop you back then?
Yeah, right. And
here's my blank cassette.
Well, the thing is, you can order twice as many records then.
Yeah, that's
because
true. You guys had a whole system worked out. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just had a Columbia House and BMG. So there was a time where I had the magazine and I got to choose 10 albums for 1 penny or whatever.
Yeah.
And I went through and I'm like, I've always wanted to hear Overkill. And I would just go through and get all these metal bands.
Yeah.
And then they'd show up and you were in heaven until the first bill arrived.
You're right. Like, then they start trying to send you more every month.
Yeah. Like I didn't order, Tears for Fears, and all of a sudden $12.99 or $20 or something later, and your dad's yelling at you. It was a weird thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
So what did you go after, you graduated from GIT? Were you in bands or did you play live?
Not that much. I moved back to Minnesota, so basically at that point I still had student loans and I was broke. So I started teaching right away, but I got an apartment.
Can I ask, I know it's personal, but around the average price to go to GIT for full time?
Well, back then, I think, if I remember, it was like $4,000 for the year.
That's nothing.
But that was back in '86.
Yeah,
so a long time ago. But you have to remember, back then the U of M was only a few $100s a quarter.
That's
so
crazy.
Everything
what the hell
was
changed,
cheaper,
man?
because like when I was working, at Arby's, when I was out there, I was making $3.35 an hour. So you're making so you work 20 hours, you make like $60.
Yeah, people don't believe that minimum wage, because when I started it was $4.25.
Yeah,
so you were in the threes.
Yeah, $3.35 an hour. But being out there, rent for apartment was either $450 or $500 a month.
I was gonna say California had to be expensive.
Yeah, so you're making like $60-$70 a week, and you're paying $450 in rent. So I was completely broke when I was out there, and that was for efficiency apartment. With beds that folded up into the wall.
That old thing?
It didn't have a bedroom. It was a bathroom,
no
kitchen,
bedroom apartment.
no bedroom.
So wait, did the couch fold into the wall or into the sofa?
There was basically the beds folded up into the wall.
Oh, really?
So when you're during the day, you just fold them into the wall. At night, you fold them down.
It's kind of smart if you think about it.
So and it worked. It was fine. And it was I liked the place because it was within like 2 blocks of GIT, so it was mostly musicians who were going there or past musicians who had gone there who was in the building. So you'd see all kinds of guitarists. You go down by the pool and people are practicing guitar at the pool side and stuff. And
I bet you the pool was just full of like future hair metal guys.
There was
beached out.
So it was cool, and I could walk to school. I could grab my guitar and walk to school. Lousy neighborhood, but a lot of crime and homelessness and stuff like that, and poverty in that neighborhood.
Was there a name to the neighborhood? Was
it right off Hollywood Boulevard? GIT at that time was on Hollywood Boulevard.
Okay.
So it was within walking distance of like the Chinese theater. But,
really?
But further down, we're away from the more expensive sides, as it started to get
the less affluent side a little bit.
So and you'd see, people doing drugs and prostitution and stuff on the street corners and stuff. This
like
was the '80s, a lot of
Guns N' Roses
stuff.
video.
I'd hear gunshots sometimes at nights and stuff like that. So,
did you ever have an incident?
Not much. I mean, they would always warn you when you first got in, don't walk at night with your guitar, but I always did.
Yeah.
I was too stubborn.
Keep a gun in your case.
I once had a couple homeless guys trying to intimidate me when I was walking late at night, asking me to give me their money, but I was like, I don't got money. I'm not giving you nothing because I was too broke. I'm not going.
I thought you were gonna say they were whistling at you because you're long hair, but everybody had long hair. Back
then. A lot of musicians in that area. So but I'd always at night walked to my girlfriend's work to walk her home because I don't want her to walk, at midnight or something home.
So she ended up getting a job.
Yeah, waitressing and hostessing and stuff. But
God, that must be weird, the waitressing scene there, because everyone's trying to make it big. I think, right?
Eventually she got a job in West Hollywood where a lot of celebrities and people would go. People like Steve Martin and stuff like that.
You guys were hobnobbing with all the
I wasn't. She was working in a restaurant that those people would eat at.
Yeah, but you were with the music side. She was the movie side. That's crazy.
That's true. So it's weird out there how you can basically within walking distance you can get to super expensive neighborhoods and get into super poor neighborhoods.
Skid Row all of a sudden.
Yeah, that was the first place when I was taking the bus more downtown that I actually saw people with the garbage cans with fires in them standing around them.
Just like in Rocky?
Yeah, just like in the movies. It's like first time I actually saw that in real life.
It's usually warm enough there to not have to, you're not going to freeze to death in California, but I'm sure it gets cool at night where you still need fire.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get anything like here. I mean, it's basically pretty moderate even at night. But the thing that bothered me weather-wise was the air quality was pretty bad back then. I think it's improved since then because they've done a lot of regulation on exhaust emissions. And the highways that there are, these huge, 5-6 lane highways in each direction, and they'd be standing still.
I've seen pictures. I've seen video of that, yeah.
So
I heard it's just a war zone during the day. It's like if you're trying to get anywhere between 3 and 6, good luck.
And I didn't have a car, so I occasionally would take a bus, but even that was usually too broke to that, so I'd usually walk places on it.
It's cool that you got to live this dream. A lot of people would dream to do this stuff. Like GIT, is it even around anymore?
Yeah, it's actually, they have online stuff and they have 4-year degrees and all this stuff now. So it's kind of evolved. I don't know much about what's going on with there now, but
because it used to, wasn't it, they started to branch out BIT and
they had that back then. It was GIT was the one that had the most students because that's Guitar Institute technology. BIT was bass. They had PIT, which was percussion, and then they had the VIT, which is vocal. The vocal was new and only had a few students in it at that point when I was there.
I love that they had one called Pit for the drummers.
Yeah. But and live playing classes and stuff, they'd get people from the bass, the percussion, and the guitar.
Form a band.
And yeah, you'd get up on stage and be playing in front of this whole room full of other classmates who are on guitar and stuff. So that was kind of a stressful.
It's a lot of pressure.
And then they would critique you sometimes. And even I remember one time asking the audience, the other students, to critique your playing. It's like, okay.
Oh man.
And you know how guitarists can be. So you have 50 guitarists in a room.
This is probably where I get my critiquing qualities. Is I was so used to back in the day. Not that I went to GIT, but it was cutthroat. Like everybody would just, every time you're on stage, you'd see the musicians with their arms crossed, watching everything you did. It really put you through the ringer. You really had to like step up.
Yeah. It can be. People are judgmental.
Definitely. I mean, even to this day on my channel, I have videos where I critique bands, but it's all for all for positive. Hopefully hopefully they take it that way. But so the whole structure of it, was it under MIT at one time, and they had to change it?
Musicians Institute was and then the separate ones was, so it's just MI, and then you had the divisions of GIT, BIT. Now it just goes by MI. They don't have the GIT anymore.
I was gonna say, I bet you a lot of parents were like, "My son's going to MIT." It's like, really?
Yeah.
No, it's not that one.
Yeah.
So after all that, you come back, you have to start teaching because
I wanted to start teaching. That was something that I felt I would be good at and enjoy.
So you never had aspirations of like being on stage and stuff?
I did, but I basically started working and teaching when I got back, because like I said, I had an apartment, I had debt, and I knew enough local band people that I wasn't going to make the money playing in a band. Especially,
you saw how they lived.
Right. So I thought, I'll do teaching, I'll work, and it took me a lot longer to where I could just do the teaching. For many years, I had to do both on that. I just, having moved back from California, I didn't have anyone I was playing with or jamming with, so I kind of just dug into that and didn't really get that involved in. I'd go to parties and go to jam things and stuff, but for a couple of years, I was playing with a drummer every week, but that was before you had the ability to do it. And we actually had to run a city page ad to get a bass player.
Oh man, those days,
So
you were like prime real estate back then. You had GIT on your resume, and you had the look. You had maybe not the ambition to be in a band, but you had the talent.
I just didn't. Honestly, I didn't have the interest to play this type of stuff. I knew I would need to if I was going to be successful in that, because at that time I was mostly listening to the neoclassical stuff and that. So my heart was more in doing instrumental music. And having seen, when I was at GIT, Paul Gilbert was still teaching, even though he was in Racer X at that time. Jennifer Batten wasn't even playing out at that time. She was just teaching. Frank Gabali was still teaching. So I saw these people having trouble even making it in bands.
Even those people struggling.
Right. And then I'd see people like Ingrid Malmsteen come in and they'd be playing a bar. Or they'd be playing warm-up. It's like, if he's playing a bar, how am I going to make it as instrumental?
Sure. So a different time.
And I think if there had been YouTube and online stuff, I probably would have. But without any of that as an option, I didn't see where I could go with it to a large extent.
What do you feel like now when you see like Polyphia, all these groups that are doing kind of what you would have done if you could have? Is it?
I mean, I think it's great that they have the ability to do that stuff now.
There's an audience for it.
Right. And you can get that audience because you put something online, and even if it's fairly niche, you can reach so many people on it. So I think that's great that these people can do that. And, you kind of were the one who inspired me, seeing you having success back when we were working together with your YouTube channel. For me, I kept thinking, I should start a YouTube channel. I never did until a pandemic hit. And then it's like, okay, I can't do a lot of the stuff I've been doing, so I'm going to actually start that.
I think that time period made a lot of people look inward and be like, what would I do if I couldn't go out into the world and do it? I was here every day just hermiting myself. If I watch my old videos, it's just weird. Every day I put out a video just to stay sane, But I forgot, like back in, was it 2016, 17, when I was starting putting up videos, but a lot of it was just my students and stuff. I wasn't really putting out super serious guitar lesson videos till later, but those were wild times. Just weird. It was like the Wild West of YouTube back then,
And I was, since like 95, I was teaching martial arts too. So I was teaching martial arts, I was teaching guitar, and I was oftentimes working our job.
That's why we get along, so martial arts and music are big.
And that's part of too, when the pandemic hit, I couldn't teach martial arts anymore. I was teaching guitar over Zoom, but that was when I couldn't teach martial arts or go to classes. That made void.
It's real hard to teach online, teaching karate or jiu-jitsu or anything.
I just, without being able to teach timing and reactions and stuff like that in person, I just didn't think it was practical. So I just stopped teaching until that blew over.
You could do it. It's just
you can
not the best way, and you probably feel like you're not giving people.
I mean, you can teach technique, but again, the technique without sensitivity, timing, distancing, all those things, it's not that effective. You need to. The key in fighting, sparring is judging distance, timing, all the
feel
reactions.
in that pocket. You just get this feel for it. You can't do that with
over Zoom.
Yeah. It's funny because I always thought if I didn't get into music, I would definitely be a martial arts instructor.
Yeah.
And if I would have had, during the pandemic, and if I was teaching, I probably would have just created like 100 different katas and just be like, learn all these. And it would have taken up a lot of time on my part. I think I would have put a lot of effort into that. But a lot of people would have felt like, hey, I could do the moves. I just don't feel like I could actually pull them off in a real situation.
Yeah. Well, in how I teach martial arts now, how I teach guitar is very similar in that the way I teach martial arts is a blend of different styles, and it's aimed at improvising and not necessarily memorizing a ton of, basically would be like songs,
sequences,
forms and stuff, or katas. So I teach short techniques, good biomechanics and structure, and then from there have people put it together to create their own flows and with the partner and react to the partner in the same way you would improvise in music.
Teach a few licks and ideas, and then they put it together.
Right. And I use the example on music of basically learning like a language. These short little ideas, little pieces of scales, sequences, arpeggios, intervals are like words, and then you have to create your own sentences from this.
Right.
And everyone improvises all the time because when we're talking, we're improvising.
Right.
So a lot of people get intimidated by the idea of improvising on music, but you're always improvising. So just think of it like learning our language, and just once you know enough words, you can put it together in a logical way, and that's how I approach music, and that's how I approach martial arts.
I like that. I like the idea of improvising and saying what you want to say, but it takes a lot to get to the point where you can express it the way you want. Even today, like I'm putting together this backing track series, and I'm playing along to it, and I'm like, I'm just sounding like a guy playing the backing tracks, like a lot of people end up sounding, and I'm like, what if instead I listened and I thought, what would I want to hear? Because here's one thing that derailed me from a lot of styles. I would listen to like a lot of fusion stuff. I really got into that for a while. But I realized I was only getting into it because of the technicality of it and how amazed I was at the levels that these people were at. Exactly. I realized I'd never listened to it. I'll watch an instructional video and just be like, whoa, and then want to learn it. But when I get in my car, I don't pop it on. So I realized that I'm not a huge fan of listening to it. I'm just in awe of it. But when I'm playing, I'm trying to be like them, but I'm not playing what I would want to listen to. So I started to inject a little bit of, hey, I would actually like to hear this, and it changed the way I improvise.
I think you have to adapt it to you. So you can take their technical ability, but you don't have to play it in the same way they are.
Right.
I mean, when I went to GIT, I had almost no background in jazz. I did 1 quarter at U of M, but I had taken classical private lessons. I'd done grew up listening to metal, rock, blues.
I was going to ask you, what you grew up with.
So I was into all that stuff, and then I get to GIT, but a lot of it was jazz oriented. Even though there's a lot of metal players going there, it was formed by jazz players. Howard Roberts was was the main founder, and he was a jazz player. And a lot of other people, Les Wise and these other people, Don Mock and stuff, were jazz players that were teaching the classes. And the jazz improv class was one of my favorite classes there, just because it taught me how to improvise. It didn't matter that it was jazz. It taught me how to break things down and improvise from it. So
it's probably the best style to improvise over if you're starting off and trying to learn the whole scope of it.
But I put into my own context. So like when I listen to music now, I'm mostly listening to metal type stuff. Isn't obvious in my playing always, because
that's true.
I usually play clean, and I'm playing, if I'm sitting down to learn something, I actually don't have that much interest in learning that stuff. I'm more likely to learn a classical violin piece or a piano piece or something like that than I am a metal piece, even though that's what I listen to.
Interesting.
So I don't necessarily play the same things I'm interested to, because it just doesn't, guitar playing doesn't inspire me as much. A lot of it I've seen before, even if it's not something I can do, and I find I get more inspired by looking at other instruments to a large extent.
So you're able to compartmentalize it better than I am. Like if I'm playing something for the sake of just learning it, that's great. But I have this like adrenaline inside that I feel when I play certain music, and it just light up inside. And I find when I play really technical stuff and I'm literally going home a lot and just trying to learn jazz, because I feel like that's like working out. Like if you ever want to just tighten up, try some jazz. Yeah. And my brain lights up when I do that, and I feel real excited. Yeah. Or if I pull off a really insane technique, my brain lights up, but my heart and my soul get excited when I play like Pantera. You know, I just can't separate that. So I'm kind of stuck in that world.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and this is why I'm not good for being commercially successful. For me, just playing other people's music just doesn't excite me at all at this point. You know, and so with teaching, I sometimes teaching, you know, 5.5 hours a day of mostly cover songs for decades.
How many Nirvana songs have you taught?
A lot. You know, I mean, the grunge area is the hardest time for me, honestly.
Really? It was the easiest time for me.
Well, it's hardest because when I first was teaching you and stuff like that, everyone wanted to do all these metal bands. And I could feed into like a violin piece or something, or a classical piece, or scales or arpeggios, all this stuff into it, because a lot of the metal players were using that stuff as influences. And so, but then you got into grunge stuff and no one was using a lot of stuff. So a lot of them weren't even using solos at all. And
that's like, true.
Okay, I'm going to teach these simple chords all day on it. And that's just killed me. So try doing that, because it's like, you know, some of these songs were so simple. It was just a few power chords moved around. It's like, I didn't want to say it, but it's like, why are you even taking lessons? You know, I can show you these power chords and you can play all these songs on it. And
that's interesting. That's why I love different teaching philosophies, because I really felt like I went far in the grunge era, because what I would do is I would see that the student was so excited about it.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
And there was plenty of music to be chosen. Like having a genre be huge for a while really helped me, because people would come in with a list of things they loved. Yeah. And then from there, I would start there, and then I would push it to where like you like to go sometimes. But their inspiration would fall off, but I would say, well, at least try this. Yeah. You know, I know you just love power chord punk songs right now, but do this. And the more I did that, the more I found out that people wanted to learn more than just the latest song, you know.
Right.
So it was kind of a different way to do it.
Right. And I never pushed people into styles. If someone only wanted to do punk stuff, we do punk stuff. That's fine. You know, I try and have them do it with good technique at least, and feed in some other things, but you know, maybe more than they needed. But I would still teach them the songs they want. I would just try and teach them some other stuff, so that if they wanted to branch out at some point, they'd have the ability to. Yeah. But I would never really force it. It's like, okay, we can spend like 20 minutes on that song, but then we're going to spend 5-10 minutes doing some technique and some
change it up a little bit,
basic stuff. And like, for example, improvising. A lot of students I find when they first start doing that don't want to do it. You know, it's intimidating to them. They don't want to do it.
It's very scary to people.
But you know, I try and do it in a systematic way. And once I got them to where they felt somewhat comfortable, a lot of people loved improvising once they felt a little bit comfortable doing it. So
it's a great place to bring people. Like, you could express yourself now if you want to. You know?
Exactly. So I don't care what genre you're doing, but I want my students to be able to create their own music in that genre. So if they want to do blues, that's fine, but they'll create blues. Yeah. You know? So if you're doing blues, we'll focus on blues scale, pentatonic scales. We won't get into all the modes and stuff. You know, if you're doing more metal, then we're going to get into all the modes and all that stuff. But
well, if you take it from that aspect, I remember teaching a kid blues because he was way into like Johnny Lang. Remember when Johnny Lang was big? Yeah. And all of a sudden I showed him just a little bit of a Dorian twist to the pentatonic scale, and he freaked out. He's like, I sound like Santana now. I'm like, it just takes up one note to change it up. And that's the kind of thing I fed off of, you know?
Yeah, and I do that too. I'd sometimes show them something like Santana and say, okay, see, they're actually adding these extra notes in.
So you can be a little more technical than just the five notes. Right. So what's crazy is the different ways teachers go about it, because I've seen it all different ways. You know, I have a friend whose teacher was really strict. Yeah. And he was like, you're going to learn jazz from A to Z my way. Yeah. And it was good for him because it was like boot camp, but it kind of stripped him of his love of the instrument. So it's hard to balance that.
Yeah, I never want that. I always want to inspire people, not force them to do something. So, you know, I will teach them technical stuff, but I try and do it in moderation, and I try and do it in a way that I show them, well, this is where you can go with this on it. And if you're not interested, that's fine. We won't do it. But give them music that they like to play, and then give them enough technical foundation that they can play other genres when they want to. Right. And, you know, gradually, if they're interested in stuff, move into other directions. You know, I want to expose people to other styles, because usually I find when I expose people to other genres, they want to learn them.
Yeah.
You get someone to, maybe try a simple classical finger picking part, and it's like, wow, this really sounds good. I can play something that like this, and then they want to actually learn finger picking and stuff like that.
That's funny because you say that, because I remember the first time Nothing Else Matters came out by Metallica, and I learned it. I'm like, oh, because the very first time I started to learn guitar, I would just buy tab books and go to my dad's trail house in Laura and have nothing to do. Yeah. So I would literally like learn D, and I'd never taken a classical lesson ever. Yeah. And I'm like doing it all the worst possible way, the hardest fingerings. And,
that's a tough song.
Yeah, and it was like one of my first songs I ever learned was D.
Yeah.
And after I learned how to really play it, with the, just condensing all your movements and everything, and the chord positions that you don't have to move. I was moving for every note, Yeah. I started to really appreciate the fact that I got into classical through Randy Rhoads, and so when I taught my students Nothing Else Matters, just doing the open string thing in the beginning, I saw so many people light up to a whole nother style that they never would have really gotten into.
Yeah. And Randy Rhoads was a big influence on me too, because honestly, that's part of why I went to college to study music.
Really?
Was because I read interviews with about Randy Rhoads, and it was, even when he was touring on with Ozzy and very successful, he was still taking lessons.
I heard that.
So I was like, well, if he can be still taking lessons while touring with Ozzy, there's no reason why I should hesitate to take lessons or get further schooling.
Very inspiring to hear that.
So that's part of what made me think, I need to go and find better education, which I didn't know anything other than college to get that, because I had many private instructors before that, but some were good, but most of them weren't at that time period. Most people in the early mid 80s were self-taught who were teaching lessons, and it wasn't, a lot of it, they weren't very good, honestly.
I think a lot of people at that time, because there was no resources, they maybe played on weekends at bars.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, hey, I could teach you Hang On Sloopy, and then after that they get kind of like boxed in.
Well, a lot of them didn't honestly even want to teach.
That's true too.
A lot of the people I encountered, they, like you said, played in bands that weren't successful enough to support them, so they were teaching for income supplement, and not because they really wanted to be.
And you could tell, because you walk in, you look at their eyes when they're teaching you, and they're like thinking of something else.
Right, and
I never wanted to be that guy.
The place I took lessons, I actually applied there when I got back from GIT, thinking, well, shouldn't be any problem to go in there and get a job. And they were like, well, if you want to teach here, we have students bringing cassettes, and then you're going to just figure this out and teach it. And it's like, I remember taking lessons like that, and the guy would spend like 20 minutes figuring out the piece, then write something down. And it's like, that's not really teaching.
Yeah, the whole lesson, he's just learning the song.
Yeah, he's learning the song, and then he quick writes something down, and it gives you. So I'm like, I'm not going to teach that way. I'm going to have the stuff written up ahead of time.
Who's telling you to teach that way? The owner of the store?
Yeah, the owner of the store told me that, and it's
that's weird.
So I was like, yeah, I'm not. If that's required, I'm not going to teach here. Then
I just can't picture an owner of a store going, "This is how you're going to teach."
Well, he's like, I want all my teachers to teach the same way, and this is how our teachers, so we can tell them that this is what we do.
I'd be like, okay, Walmart of guitar lessons.
It's like, okay, so me having pre-printed out songs and scales and chords and everything in handouts, and then you don't want that. You want me to just figure it all off, because it's
weird.
Like,
yeah, I would say overqualified then if you're
so it kind of surprised me when I got back that I actually had trouble getting some of the teaching jobs because of things like that, or you'd go in places and they were like, yeah, we don't have any openings, and so
I think I had to kind of not fight my way in, but I had to show a lot of patience to finally land one spot. Then I had to prove myself that I could retain students, and after I started I started doing weird things out of the ordinary. Like I would offer the first free lesson to everybody, and then I would, always have this, this way of having the students get excited about it. And what they would do is they would run out to the waiting area all excited, and their parents would always go, what's going on? They're not this excited about anything.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, I think I'm just good at, maybe it's because I'm a Libra, listening to people and balancing what I need to show them with what I know they're excited about.
Yeah.
Sometimes it matches up, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. But so towards the end, when like I was saying, people are just like, I don't know what I like. I don't know. I just felt like the spirit was dying in people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough when people won't give you any input, but then it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to teach you some basics.
Yeah, here we go.
We'll learn some chords, learn some simple songs, and if there's something you want, tell me. And that's
when I'd whip out the Hal Leonard book. Here we go, EFG. We're starting out here, and some people love that. Yeah. I want to do a video about that soon, about how learning notation from the start was a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I never taught that way unless someone requested it, because that's how I learned when I first started. it was doing the method books.
Yeah,
and
open position.
It was so unproductive as far as actually learning anything. I mean, I remember, you know, again, I was into kind of metal and stuff like that, and I went through like 2.5 of those like Alfred's method books, so I could read music pretty good, which helped me when I got in college. You know, so that was good. But I hadn't learned like a power chord.
That's
so
crazy.
It's like, you know, I knew like 30, 40 open chords. They never even showed me a power chord. It's like I'm listening to stuff like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and stuff like that, and you never showed me power chord. I didn't know to ask, you know, because I didn't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. So
that's so funny. Yeah, if you teach out of those books, people could, you know, stack notes. They could play melodies in open position, but then if you play Green Day, they have no idea what they're doing. Right. So it's a really interesting thing. I think it's a good supplementary thing to throw in on the top and just be like, do this on the side.
For me, and again, unless someone requests to learn to read sheet music, I'd rather people know the notes on the neck than on the staff.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You know, so I'd rather you know where those notes are when you're playing than Bill read it on there. Yeah. Standard music versus tab, they're both just methods to get the notes off the paper onto the guitar, in my opinion. If I didn't know how to read the standard music, of course I couldn't be transcribing these other instruments and stuff. But in the end, if you're not interested in that, you don't necessarily need that until you're more advanced. If at advanced stage you want to learn that, then great. You know,
what I found, I'm gonna, like I said, do a whole video on this, but as I was teaching notation reading, I found that there's side benefits to doing that though. It calms people. Like you have to really focus.
Yeah,
you got to play in time. You have to use perfect technique, because if you screw up hitting just the F note or you mute the other string, you really hear every little thing. So it's a good way to like sharpen your skills.
Sure.
But yeah, you could go crazy if that's all you do.
Yeah,
especially in metal.
And for most of those method books, it's nothing that anyone would actually want to play.
Right.
It doesn't sound good. You know, so, you know, I want to get people, if they want to play Ozzy, I want them to play an Ozzy song as soon as possible. And, you know, that's going to be up the neck. It's not going to be a position you're learning off the standard music. Right. So you're going to have to learn off tab.
Yeah.
It's going to be years before you do it on standard notation.
I could only think of maybe maybe 2 or 3 Ozzy tunes where you could like do a bastardized version of like Goodbye to Romance down there or something.
And you could maybe transpose it, but it's not going to sound right. And it's going to be pretty awkward on it.
Dad, look what I learned. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
What are they teaching you?
Right.
So I think this is so cool how life is full circle. Just the fact that this guitar is sitting behind me right here.
Yeah.
And thinking about, like, when you came in, I was looking at your T-shirt. Is that a band thing?
I purposely wore it today because actually it's kind of similar to you. It was a student of mine's band, who's like 19, 20 now, playing a death metal band locally.
Nice.
And so this is his band. And when he was 14 and taking lessons from me, he actually recorded an entire record that you can find on Spotify, doing every part of it himself.
Like a Prince kind of guy.
Yeah, guitar, vocals, drums, and all the recording himself. He recorded a full record.
I love these. I love the spirit of just saying, screw it, I'm going to do it.
Right, when he's like 14 years old.
Yeah.
And so he kept taking lessons, so he's like 18 or so with me, and now he's playing some of that same music live in a local band. He's drummer and bassist to join him up. And
what are they called? I can't see because your hair is...
Ekphasis.
Ekphasis. So that's so cool.
ECPHASIS.
See, the trick is to kind of have it legible, but you can't really be able to read it easily.
So many of those death metal bands, you can't read it at all.
Yeah, I had somebody design me an Art of Guitar death metal logo, and it looks so badass. I haven't used it yet, but you really have to, I think you have to tilt it sideways to read it. It's really bizarre, but that's actually somewhat legible. I can
so I thought, you know, it is kind of full circle, you know, because you're doing the same thing when you're taking lessons. You're doing your metal band and stuff. And
Sanctus bed, It's so funny that, so I don't know if my friend Al was taking lessons with you before me, because I got referred to you somehow.
Yeah, there was a bunch of people in that Nokia area who were playing in bands, teen bands. I remember they had like one of those teen clubs that put their flyers up.
Yep.
I remember at one point there was 3 different bands on the schedule. They all had students of mine.
That's funny.
And it's so.
I bet you a lot of my friends like went crazy.
So I think a lot of people from like your high school and stuff were probably taking lessons.
So too. Coon Rapids is such a huge school, so we had a lot of guitar people, you know. Yeah. But just the idea of learning from you taught me some stuff that to this day, like I'm so glad, like the 4 patterns climbing up,
sequences and stuff.
Yeah, and it allowed me to play like Fade to Black a lot better and all that stuff. And then I would take what you gave me, and there was no internet. I had nothing else to do. Plus, I was obsessed. I would just do it all the time until I'm drooling on myself as I'm playing because I'm so like dialed in. Yeah. And then my band starts to play shows. Next thing you know, I'm using all the stuff you teach me on stage, and I'm like, this stuff is paying off. It just depends what you do with information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm glad you were able to. It's funny you were my teacher though, because you never used distortion. I would come in and I'm like all Kirk Hammett, geeking out on Kirk Hammett, and Alex Skolnick was a big influence. Yeah. And you're just like, well, I have clean sound and here's this pattern you got to learn. I'm just like, okay, but it really helped me out.
Yeah. Well, I just think teaching, if you put a lot of effects and distortion on, I maybe sometimes demonstrate a song so they can hear how it sounds on the record, but it's harder for students to really pick it up. If you have a beginner student, especially some of the students bringing acoustic guitars, and if you're doing all this effects stuff, they're not going to be able to relate to that.
Right.
And if you have like digital delay and stuff on, it's going to totally throw off a beginner thinking, why don't I sound like that when they don't have that?
Here's a U2 riff. Like, I can't do that.
It doesn't sound the same when I do it. Yeah.
I remember teaching somebody U2 Sunday Bloody Sunday. Yeah. He's like, that doesn't sound right. Or what was it? Or The Streets Have No Name. It's all delay. It's that cool delay trick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, trust me. Then I hit the pedal and their eyes got huge. Like, whoa. It's like Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee too. It's like, check this out. Yeah. I just do a diminished walk up. And that's cool. And then I hit the delay and it's just like two guitar. It was so amazing to people.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you talk about Sanctus. I remember watching one of your videos where you're teaching all the solos from it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I can see some of the stuff I taught in that solo.
I definitely got my money's worth. Hopefully I paid you. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you would give me one thing and I would just run with it.
Yeah.
So I think 10 of our songs I do the 4 pattern in some way, even if it's just a little segment of it. But and then I started to just develop my own style by copying a lot of my favorite players and then getting info from you, and I was like filling in the gaps. It was a really great symbiotic relationship.
And you probably weren't doing sweep picking before you took lessons, I'm assuming.
With you, because you were always big on economy
economy picking.
And so I think I saw a Frank Gambale video and I couldn't believe what he was playing with very little movement. Yeah. So because of you, I started to do circular picking. I started to do not huge 6-string sweep picking or 7-string, but I would do like 3-string. Yeah. So that diddle thing. And it's all from you.
Yeah. Well, because I remember when I got back from GIT, before I went out there, I didn't even know what sweep picking was or economy picking and that stuff because, again, no internet. So when I got back, it's like I saw very few people were doing that at that point in this area because it just hadn't reached this area yet.
We're all alternate picking everything?
Because, again, without internet, things were clustered in the coasts and these things, and the information didn't transfer.
That's how scenes developed because just this pocket of people were doing certain things.
Right, you see each other doing and you share information and stuff. And
who started the economy picking cruise?
Well, Frank Gambale kind of did. I mean, he was the one who put out the first books and videos on it. Okay. I'm not saying there weren't people who didn't do it before him.
I have one of his books, and it's insane. It's like 3-note per string scales with all economy picking.
Right. Well, he even does pentatonic scales with all economy picking.
That's right.
So I mean, he was what made me start doing economy picking. When I started GIT out there, I was just doing alternate picking. Okay. About halfway through, I went to one of his open counselings, and that's when I switched over because he was so fluid sounding, and I was like, I want to be fluid like that. Yeah. I mean, Paul Gilbert's great. He doing the economy and the alternate picking, but it's more machine gun like, and not as fluid. So I wanted to switch over to it, and it was tough.
Yeah,
because I had been doing alternate picking and being strict with it, and then having to switch. It took me a couple of weeks before.
It must have been like playing left-handed all of a sudden.
Yeah, it took. I had to go everything super slow and just really go. Okay, am I still economy picking, or am I reverting back to?
It feels natural. Picking? That's not good.
Yeah. So
the whole on 2 strings, down, down, up, down, down, up. That helped me so much with Randy Rhoads licks, with Hammett licks.
Yeah, so I almost gave up after a couple of weeks. Then it's like, no, I'm sticking to it. I'm going to get this done.
I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you taught it to me early, so I got it right away. And then later, I actually did the opposite. I started to alternate pick everything. Sure. But it's always in the toolbox.
Alternate picking is in the economy picking. You know, it's economy picking is just a string changes. There are mini sweeps, and I'm not doing the strict economy picking where I would design my licks to make sure that I can sweep it. Yeah. I do the lick however it is. I still play normal pentatonics fingerings, which are alternate picking and things like that. I just do the sweeps when they present themselves. So you don't do what I do? I force them sometimes. Like I'll literally hit a note twice to make it work. I sometimes do that. But I honestly try and only do that when it sounds better. So sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I'll listen to it at slow speeds. I usually don't do it.
Okay.
At maximum speeds, I think sometimes it makes the line flow better. So then I'll do it. But even then, I might like double hit a note, like when I'm switching directions and on the one side, but then not double pick on the other direction.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, and I never was someone that even in sweeping did hammer and pull offs on it, which a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it was more that I was like, I want to be able to go back and forth from my sweeping to my alternate picking fluidly without hesitation. So I need to learn that. So once you learn that, then there's really no reason to hammer and pull off the notes unless
that's the Ingvar Malmsteen philosophy. I think when he sweeps, he never does a pull off when he comes down, because you think that's the easiest way to do it.
Well, a lot of players do it because it is. You can do all down and do a pull off and then
pull it up. Yeah.
You don't have to do the little alternate picking group in that. So
I kind of cheat sometimes and I do that, but it's great the first time you master automatic economy picking while you're doing like legato and everything's automatic. You just know how it feels to constantly be flowing. Yeah. And I could literally for an hour just nonstop play notes, never stopping, and just it's just a crazy feeling to not have to think while you're doing it over time.
And if you're going to get that speed, you can't think. It's happening too quick because the notes are going by at such a speed that
if you did think about it,
if you think you're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
So you need to
have like martial arts. If you think you're late,
Yeah, exactly. It's too late if you stop to think about it.
I think the first time I really found the magic of it, I was trying to learn Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
And there's a 5 sequence in pentatonic that he does right in the intro, and he picks it all. But I found a way to go. But what I have to do is I have to rake over a dead string to make it work. But it's so fast you don't hear it.
Yeah.
So there's weird magic formulas.
Right. I've sometimes done that where I've muffled a string. But again, it's usually I try not to do that unless I like the sound of it. Yeah. I'm pretty hard on myself of saying I'm not going to take a consider an easier way to do something.
That's your martial arts mind.
Yeah, I'm going to fix my technique instead.
Yeah.
And then if the easier way sounds better, then I'll do that. But I don't want that to be my only option.
You know what I do? I do it the hard way for years and years and years until I wear out and I go, okay, I should have done it the right way the first time. Yeah. That's my whole jiu-jitsu life. Muscling it, holding my breath, just making things happen, and then just going, oh, I should have listened to the teacher.
I should just relax.
Relax and let the technique flow a little bit.
And you have people like Steve Morris who does all alternate picking crazy fast. So it's not that you can't do it.
That's true.
But it's just so much harder.
Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes I remember doing a solo in the studio and I was using a lot of like flow techniques. Yeah. And it just wasn't edgy enough to what I needed for the kind of music I was doing. So I just switched to, the actual picking, and it sounded way better for that style. Yeah. And I realized when I started playing like Pantera that I was playing everything the easy way. Like there's a way to play Cowboys from Hell, the main riff, that flows and it feels really easy. Yeah. Kind of like the intro to Cult of Personality. There's a really easy way to play it, but then there's the real way where you pick everything, and it does make a difference, even though it's a bummer to play the real way.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
even for Vernon Reid, like when I watch him, he looks like he's just like focusing everything on that.
Yeah, and these people who create these pieces, they're really working on this and trying to make it the best way you can, the best sounding.
Yeah.
So if you just pick up and try and learn it, it's like who knows how long they practiced to get it down.
That's true.
And some of the stuff that I do in videos when I'm creating the original licks, hopefully I make it look easy because shoot my licks in a single take on it.
I want to talk about that a little bit,
but I practice the hell out of it to get it that I'm not even going to try and record the video unless I can do this. If it's a 20-second solo of all 16th notes, if I make a single mistake more than like once out of 10 reps, I'm not even going to try and record it. I because I know when I turn on the camera, I'm going to probably make more mistakes. So I want to get a few minutes into a video and then I'd mess a note up.
So you prepare for your videos like I would prepare for stage. Yeah. Like you get to the point where you almost can't mess up because when you hit record, there's an added pressure and things are likely to go wrong.
Exactly. And honestly, I don't work off scripts either. So it's verbal mistakes more often than guitar mistakes. I just screw up something that is kind of incomprehensible in my talking, and it's like, okay, I have to do this over again.
Well, that was the only critique I was ever going to say, because doing YouTube for all these years, I slowly chip away at things that I suck at, things that I know, like people will comment and like, do you get harsh comments or are they pretty positive?
I usually don't, because I think because my channel is fairly niche, that it doesn't have a lot of mainstream viewers. A lot of people coming to it are advanced players already on it, and I do get beginners too, and I've created more beginner videos, but I don't get much negativity on it, hardly at all. And most of my videos have 100% likes on it, because people are there, want to be there, because the algorithm really doesn't push my videos. So they're coming there because they want to learn whatever I'm teaching usually.
Yeah, all it takes is that one video. Like, you know, Brandon Wells?
Mm-hmm.
So he has Soundwell guitar.
Yeah.
And lately he's been like changing his thumbnails. He's been doing these things. He's getting a lot of views now. And it's just like, sometimes you don't know what it's going to take.
Yeah,
if you even want that.
Yeah, I want that because someday I'd like to be monetized. It'd be nice.
Like,
but
what's the new rule? Is it 3,000?
If you need 4,000 watch hours. I've got over 1,000 subscribers, but I have nowhere near 4,000 watch hours. So that has to be within the past year. So
okay. Oh, really?
Yeah, 4,000 within the past year.
Oh, I thought it was total.
No, that'd be much easier. Yeah,
that
so
sucks.
because I've been doing it for a few years now, so my watch hours are spread out over it. But yeah, I have no idea why they picked something. My most successful video on it was me talking about a chord book on it. And
isn't that weird?
And well, the thing is, it did nothing for like 3 months, and then all of a sudden the algorithm picked it up.
You never know.
And then it took off. And it's like, you know, why for 3 months you did nothing? It had a good click-through rate the whole time, but then all of a sudden the algorithm decides.
I go back on my most successful videos and I look at the timeline on it, and a lot of it's flat, and then it just starts to like a little bit, and then it goes. But the ones that do take off, the other videos benefit from it. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, this guy, and then like a suggested video will come up on the side, and they'll click it, and it's just a snowball
and
effect.
You get subscribers from this.
That's it
too. But I've also noticed it's a lot of times those ones that hit a cliff and the algorithm just stops pushing them all of a sudden. So it's like,
I always wonder, like, what did I do?
Yeah, it's like nothing changed. It's the same video.
I think Rick Beato just did a video. Like he's like, I thought I do YouTube. Well, he gets every time he puts out a video, it gets huge numbers. But it's like, even if I'm getting close to 1 million subscribers. Yeah. I'll put out a video, it'll get 5,000 views and just die, blow away. And it's like, you know what, this is what's keeping you honest, because I can't stop anyway. Like I was doing all this stuff before YouTube. I was just doing it with myself and my friends. Like, hey, watch this cool thing. Yeah. But I feel like YouTube wants you to stay on the treadmill, you know? Yeah. So it's almost like good in a way, because if I ever feel lazy, I'll pull through with something, even if I don't feel like it. But luckily, I'm always inspired. I have, 500 different ideas that I need to get through. So it's like there's not enough time in the world to do it, but luckily I'm able to express it somehow.
Yeah. And they claim that how often you put out a video doesn't really matter. But I noticed if I haven't had a video out for a while, everything goes down. The old videos don't get as much views.
It's like a net, and when you stop, everything pulls down. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. So I think they just want to keep it working. Yeah, which can be good. I know a lot of people who give up on YouTube. But it burns very sporadic. Yeah,
potentially. If you feel like you have to have a video out every so many days, that I think can lead to worse content.
It's a stressor because you just feel that date coming, and you're just like, oh, what am I going to do? I tell people who want to start YouTube, I'm like, well, you better be passionate about it. Like if you start talking about like ham radios and you really don't care about them, they're just popular at the moment. I don't know why I chose that example, but you're going to run dry, and then you're going to start doing stupid stuff like, reaching for content and really trying stupid things. So.
Right. Yeah. And I've done, over 160 videos, and it's, like I say, just hit 1,000 subscribers on.
Congratulations! So 1,000's a big milestone.
Yeah, I mean, that start to possibly get monetized on it. But I'm gonna keep doing it. Partially just because I'm stubborn, but partially because I am doing subjects I like usually on it. So I'm challenging myself. I'm making myself a better player by doing it. It's forcing me to practice. When if I wasn't posting anything and I'm not playing out, there gets to the point where it's like, why practice?
You know what this is like? So. It's like, have you been watching Cobra Kai?
Yeah.
God, I love that show. Yeah. It got really teenagey towards the end, but the last episode just blew me away. But having a reason to sharpen up is such a big thing when you get to like our level of you've just done it your whole life. Yeah. It's like, okay, I did it. I feel like I never have to go on stage ever again. Yeah. I honestly retired 2 years ago. Yeah. But then I'm like, every time there's a show coming up, I literally joined a foreigner tribute band on drums just to sharpen my skills. Sure. Yeah. And I got to the point where I played 2 shows, and it was one of the worst shows ever, the second one, and I just quit. But I'm like, I was focused. It's like having a fight coming up.
Right, exactly. Same as martial arts. Schools that never doing competitions, I totally get that. Yeah. But it's hard to motivate to practice. It's...
what's motivating? A punch to the face.
Right, knowing that, or just knowing that you have to go out in front of people and perform a forum or something. Anything where people are going to be watching you, or like you said, if it's sparring or something like that, and you don't get
physical
hit.
pain. Yeah,
but it gives you motivation to practice. But if you're just doing it and going home and practicing, and then it's
there's something to that. Some people can get excited about just pulling something off, and I think I could do that during the pandemic. That's all I did.
Yeah.
But I did have an outlet, but a lot of that was goofy stuff back then. Yeah. But what's crazy is when I was doing jujitsu quite a bit, every time I was about to eat a brownie or something that wasn't good for me, or I was going to just be lazy that day, I thought about being trapped under somebody and gassing out and not get, my teacher watching and I'm like drooling and getting choked. That's to me was motivation. And I would do the extra push-ups. I would do the extra cardio. And I found I need those milestones sometimes to really
it makes
get
it easier
together.
To motivate. It's hard. I mean, some people can totally self-motivate without that, but most people I think have trouble doing that at some point in their journey. And honestly, before the pandemic, that's where I was on guitar. I was kind of burned out on it.
Really?
I was putting more focus on martial arts, honestly. I was teaching, most of my income was coming from guitar, so I was still teaching, but that's not really practicing.
Yeah.
But then when I got home from teaching the guitar, I didn't really want to practice that much on my own. I went to martial arts classes and did that instead.
Okay. It's
so
a good balance, because
so
when you have a guitar in your hands all day, it's hard to pick it up later.
Right. So then when the pandemic hit, I couldn't do martial arts. That's when I got reinvigorated with the guitar. And started, practicing again and playing, and then started creating the YouTube videos, and so that's got me refocused, because that was my first love. I didn't, I started guitar in like '82 when I was like 15.
That's so crazy, yeah.
And then I didn't start martial arts till like '89 after I got back from GIT. So I was already teaching guitar before I started martial arts.
Okay.
So that was my first love on it, but.
Mine too. Something about, I grew up on ninja movies and Sho Kosugi and Bruce Lee.
I always watched old Hong Kong movies.
Nice. Me too.
The Black Belt Theater and stuff on Saturday afternoons.
Just if you watch it now, you're like, that is some over the top stuff. But man, just seeing those people doing kung fu. I watch kung fu too, but I always love the magical side of martial arts. And then when I started to do it, Karate Kid got big, and it was just like this wave of karate. Yeah. And then I watched the UFC, and I realized I sucked on the ground. I went to that world and did that for 15 years. And I'm just like, it just keeps, I don't know, keeps finding its way back into my life. I feel like I'm going to be in a wheelchair still practicing wrist locks or something.
What I like about both of them is both guitar and martial arts are so varied. There's so many different genres of music, styles of martial arts that you can constantly keep learning. And that's honestly what I like about that stuff. It was always partially just to challenge myself. I liked the challenge. So I think that's partially why I got into the martial arts more, because that was new. So it was more challenging. There was more to learn compared to the guitar at that point, even though there's of course endless stuff to learn guitar on it. But
there's no belts in guitar though. That's the problem.
Yeah. And most styles of martial arts didn't have belts. I did either. This is more of the traditional stuff. Yeah. Well, I did everything from historical European to fencing to the Chinese, Filipino, Indonesian, all those different arts. Basically, it's like music. I thought I'm going to go to as many different styles as possible, just like, I cite classical and jazz and blues and that because you learn something from every style. Yeah. And as a teacher, I want to be familiar with as many genres of music or as many styles of martial arts, because otherwise I feel like I'm not able to give everything to a student if I'm blind in some areas. They come in, they want to learn this. I have no idea how to do that. I'm not going to fake it. Right. I'm either going to learn that or I'm going to say, I don't know that on it.
Part of the reason why I love teaching is that it forces me to learn more too, because like I had some students that were really pushing me towards the end. Yeah. And I had one student in particular who every time he came in, he did everything I told him to do plus 10 things. Yeah. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, can you teach me altered scale today and all this stuff? And I'm like, ooh, I haven't used that in a while. That made me sharpen my skills. And even though I don't use a lot of that stuff all the time, it's in the toolbox, and I know it comes out subconsciously. With what I
and some of the stuff I learned at GIT, I didn't use for many years, but sometimes decades later, I would pull it out and start being like, I'm starting to find a use for this. So I always kind of kept it in the back of my mind, would go back to some of those ones. For a long time, I never used altered arpeggios or whole tone scales and stuff like that. But recently, I've been using altered arpeggios on it. Nice. And, so it's, you find that knowing that you can access it then.
Well, you never know the situations you're going to be in. Let's say we're, in our teens again, we have to relearn guitar. I love having a toolbox that's varied because I started to do commercial stuff. Like people wanted me to like sub in on their, movie projects. Sure. Somebody wanted a commercial thing and somebody needed this weird sounding alien thing. And I was like, whole tone scale would sound cool here. They're like, ooh, that's perfect. I'm like, thank God I studied that for like a week.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and they're fairly simple in concept. Yeah. It's just finding a way to use them that's interesting.
That's not forced in like I would do. I would force in a weird scale just because I knew it.
Right. So I would, any of that stuff that if I'm not using it regularly, I would go and try and improvise with it and try and come up with licks that I could use it. And then maybe those would work into my playing. Maybe they wouldn't. If they wouldn't, that's okay. I feel like what works for me the best is I always call it like my safety net of tricks and licks and concepts. So if I'm on stage and all of a sudden, boom, I have to improvise, I fall back on what I know the best, kind of like martial arts. Of course.
If you don't know the ground, you're not going to just go to the ground.
Yeah.
So I learned that if I add one little new thing and work on it for like a month and add it to what I already know and implement it in a usable way, I'm more likely to use it forever.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important if you learn a new idea, start creating variations on the idea, start creating different ways you can use that to put into different contexts, different ways to enter and to finish, whether it's a martial arts move or a guitar move, it's the same thing. If you only have one way to get into that move, you're probably not going to use it much. Yeah. But if you have a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different ways to do it, and a bunch of variations where you can go into something slightly different and change some of the notes, add notes, subtract notes, or adapt the technique, the martial arts technique to your opponent, slightly different positions and stuff. You can really use it then. If you only, a lot of traditional martial arts get in the habit of they teach a technique and it's only answer to one question. If someone does this,
especially knife defense. If somebody does this,
it's like
go like this.
Okay, you need to learn concepts. And you need to learn body mechanics, and then you can apply them to different situations.
Definitely. With jiu-jitsu, it's funny because you learn a new concept. And you see it all of a sudden everywhere. It's like when you buy a red car or something, or a certain car.
How many different ways can you do an armbar?
Yeah, right.
It's not just this one position. You can use it if you understand the mechanics of it. You can use it in endless different ways.
I saw a guy do it in the air against the cage. He was like, someone lifted him up and he still pulled it off on the cage. He got dropped on his head, but it's one of those things where you start to see it everywhere. And you're like, whoa, it's always been there. I just didn't have the vision for it back then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times in both guitar and martial arts, it's understanding when to use it. People try and force things, like you said, forcing a lick that maybe isn't appropriate for the situation, or forcing a technique that's not appropriate just because you've been working on it or just because you like it.
You want to try it.
Yeah. So that gets you in trouble a lot of times.
One time I was at a competition. It was like in school competition. That's how we got our next belt. And I learned the twister, which is this. Have you ever seen the twister? There's a wrestling twister, but there's a jiu-jitsu twister too, where you get their legs locked a certain way. You're both laying on your back, and you reach over and you basically twist their spine.
Okay, sure.
And they're facing towards you, and their back is basically breaking in half. And I just kept wanting to pull it off. Yeah. I just had this stubborn goal, and it got me in so much trouble because I'd put myself in bad positions to try it out. So same with guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, you force the lick into the wrong harmony or the wrong context. Is like, and I've seen really good players do it too. Yeah, players that maybe are playing outside their normal genre of music, and so they try and play in that new genre. And it's like, you're a great player, just play yourself. Yeah, don't try and force yourself to sound like this because you're warming up for someone from a different genre or something like that.
See some blues guy doing some tapping, you're like, oh, just don't do that. Yeah, but I found that one really good example that I've really found this to work with a lot of people is if you know your pentatonic shapes, throwing in the blues scale, even just adding the one note in there, can open up a whole nother world. And all of a sudden you're throwing that in fluently over time. That's a really easy way to go into that.
Right, and then you can keep adding more things. You can, if you can add the major note in the minor pentatonic, especially if there's a dominant chord in the background or something.
Mixolydian sounds.
You can add like the major 7 in also as a passing note to create tension. And like recently I've done some videos on pentatonic where, like, for example, I sweep pentatonic and put like one note on each string.
My friend literally just showed me that he's doing that too. He does 1 then 2 then 1 then 2 on each string.
Yeah. So I was doing just 3-string groupings.
Okay.
Because I was doing it so you could all be within your reach, but it shifts you a position.
Interesting.
So then you can go right into your normal pentatonic, then use that as a way to shift to your next position.
Oh, cool.
And you can sweep that then too, so you get a little different feel on it. But I found it forced if you do more than 3 strings. So I do 3 strings and then use that as a way to shift. So again, just different ways to look at how you can apply something that you've known for many, many years, but maybe didn't think. So
I love that.
That's what the YouTube's making me do, is rethink things I've maybe done for decades, but how can I do this in a different way for myself and for students and for viewers?
It's like a dual learning process, which is great, dual benefit. Yeah. I put out a video, I think last year, where a concept that just lit up in my head one day when I was practicing. I was like, when you learn scales, you always learn from the low to the high and back. Like, I'm going to do everything starting in the middle 2 strings. And so I did all the scales on 2 strings. And it just felt like this elevator. Yeah. And the patterns emerge right away. You're like, okay, at first it's hard not to just see like a rectangle, then a square, then a weird shape, or whatever. And then I'm like, what if from there you just go off on whatever you stop at? So you're in an elevator. Oh, I'm here on this floor. I could do this. Exactly. And it's a cool way to think of the guitar from the middle outward versus down up, because my whole life has been like the extremes.
Yeah, right. Or think of like the 6-note groupings, and then see those as
open
they
up
move
too.
around. Yep.
Yeah. Those are huge blocks too.
Yeah, or play just on 1 string. And think
the
of
1-string class.
Yeah, so if you because then if you move around on that gets you shifting positions.
Yeah, I could play Wasted Years. Yeah, that's so cool. That
or I don't know if you ever tried this, but play 2 notes per string in your 7-note scales. You'll move diagonally backwards on it.
Say that again. 2 notes.
2 notes per string in your regular 7-note scales. So every time you'll shift back. So you're moving diagonally.
That sounds like a Paul Gilbert thing.
No, he mostly shifted forward on. So he would, he'd be going the normal direction. That if you're playing, you're going this way. Yeah. You'll go this way.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I first picked that up when I was at GAT because the guy who's staying at the pool, I saw him do that, moving that direction. I was like, I never see him moving that direction.
That's down and away
on the guitar. And I didn't really ask him, but he was like, okay, I'm going to go home and figure out what's going on here. So then it's like, okay, if I go C, D, E, F, G, A, I'm going to be moving. So I then created scales and moved 2 notes on that.
That's contrary to what you're used to. So it gives an interesting sound.
So it gives you the ability to, again, zigzag through the neck and not just going, straight lines and diagonal patterns. Forwards. Yeah. So, a lot of times I like doing shapes where I'm going more like that. I also do a lot of skipping notes within it. So you can create your own pentatonic ones. So I'll be doing a 3-note per string scale, but I'll leave off one of the notes. And then you can experiment with leaving off any one of the 3. Yep. And that gets you almost a little bit more arpeggio or pentatonic type sound as you shift through the neck.
It could sound a little outside too if you start hitting the 4s, and the 7s is just like, I think because of you, I really got obsessed with 3-note per string as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially the basic form where it's just like very symmetrical all the way up. There's so much string skipping, that you could do, and it just lights up everywhere you go. It's such a cool thing.
Right. And that's what I was always trying to do, is try and figure out technically any possibility. I don't want to be limited when I'm improvising to a certain thing. As many possibilities as I can get, I want. And then I have to figure out a way to use them. Yeah. If they don't make sense. So sometimes I create something just as a concept, and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't sound that good. In which case, okay, I still maybe got my technique a little bit better on that.
Making it musical is tough. That's why I think the Alan Holdsworth kind of world is so bizarre to me, because he explains it in videos. He's like, I just see every note possibility when I look at the neck. Yeah. I think he's an alien. Yeah. But then he goes, but now to make it sound musical, I have to like do this and this, and it's just like, whoa, I can't think on his level. Yeah. I'm not there yet. So maybe when I'm 90 or something. I don't know.
Well, and from GAT, I came from a very much see the whole neck in a certain key type thing. And then on my own after that, I started saying, okay, but that sounds very scalar. So now I'm going to jump intervals. I'm going to leave notes out. I'm going to create my own, 6-note, 5-note scale runs within the things and go different directions and that type of thing to free it up so it doesn't sound like a scale. Yeah. Even if you're running a scale, I don't want it to sound like a scale.
Right, exactly. Imagine, it's just kind of like fighting somebody and doing a kata while you're fighting. It's like, no, you gotta make it work. That's why my improvising thing I was doing even today was just listening as I was playing and being like, do I even like what I'm playing? Do I like the sound of what I'm doing? It seems like such an obvious thing, but you get lost in just hitting the right notes all the time.
Honestly, listening is so important to practice. I mean, listening to how it sounds, listening to, is your technique actually what you think it is?
Yeah.
Are you actually hitting the notes clean, especially at fast speeds?
Yeah.
You know, if you're playing 10, 12 notes a second, you really need to listen to hear if you're actually playing those clean on it. And that's partially why I don't like practicing with like delay on or something, because it makes it harder to hear those notes. I want to really, so a lot of times I will close my eyes and I'll be listening to it if I'm playing really hard passages, because I really want to make sure I'm playing clean on that and can hear all the notes.
Then there's the other dimension of that where I like some sloppy players too.
I mean,
so you'll hear somebody just kind of go crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's that too. So there's just so many
areas.
Well,
it's what feel you want. You know, I mean, like blues tends to be sloppy, and that's to some extent technique, but sometimes it's intentional because you want that attitude of a lot of times being pissed off. And if you're too clean, it doesn't sound pissed off.
Yeah, you don't want to play Damn Right I Got the Blues and you're like perfectly played every note. It's like,
and that's where sometimes, even if you have good technique, add in breaks and stuff like that, which makes it sound a little bit more.
I do too many rakes, but I love the feeling of digging into the guitar.
Yeah.
I'm really about traction and like friction when I play. So it doesn't always sit well if I'm trying to play something real pretty and fluty and stuff. But man, I feel like that's part of my style is to dig in.
Yeah, that's how you develop your style. And something I think a lot of people neglect, and I understand especially with a lot of effects and other things, but dynamics, a lot of people play the same volume all the time. And it's like dynamics adds so much emotion and personality to it. And it's just like listening to some talk. If they're always talking monotone, that's just not interesting, no matter how interesting the stuff they're saying.
Right.
You can say something super interesting, but if you put it out that way, it doesn't sound interesting.
I compared it one time to like, is it an EKG where you see the heartbeat? It's like, what's a straight line tell you? That you're dead. You know? So if you're playing everything in that straight line, eventually people tune out.
Or especially if it's same speed, same dynamics, everything's the same. It's like, I don't care how interesting you're doing, it's just not going to sound interesting.
Exactly.
And I think some technical players get into that trap too much because they are constantly trying to practice with a metronome and have everything perfect. So then it sounds too perfect. It's like a drum machine or something. It doesn't sound real anymore.
Yeah, it's like you hit play on a drum machine. I heard Paul Gilbert one time. It's funny because I think of him as like the pristine shredder of like a certain time period. And I think he got fed up with that because he went totally blues for a while and he started going real just feel. Yeah. And I respected it, but I think the first time he got a hint of that working was the solo to Be With You.
Yeah.
He was talking about, he's like, we're in the studio and I'm doing that solo. By the way, it's a great solo, acoustic solo. And he's like, at the end, you could hear me drag a little bit. He's like, and I was going to do it again because I'm so used to perfection. But we just felt like it felt right. And all of a sudden, we kept it, and it's this huge hit.
Right. Well, and if you think, when you're doing melodies, think of like singers. They're usually not singing in perfect time.
If they
stretch out notes, they shorten notes and stuff. That's what makes a good melody. So it's no different on guitar if you're doing that.
Yes.
And like I remember one of my instructors saying too, one of the problems with guitar is you don't have to breathe. Like a saxophone or something, you have to stop to breathe occasionally.
That's true.
Guitarists can just keep playing forever. And
that's a great way to put it.
So you need to phrase stuff and occasionally put in those changes of speed or the pause, drag a little bit, do something that makes it more interesting, more human sounding. And I remember back in I think it was early 90s or something, when the drum machines actually started programming errors into the drum machines because they were too perfect, and they
had the randomizer kind of quantized
thing. They were advertising that we add in random errors occasionally and slight timing differences so it doesn't sound so machine-like.
It's like you could choose how drunk you want your drummer. 3 Jack Daniels, please. Yeah, just for a while, everything, the 80s, a lot of stuff was very sequenced perfectly.
Right.
And they found ways to make it human still because they would do real synths over the top.
Yeah.
But with these, all of a sudden, everything was sequenced. It got real robotic. And it got to the point where it was like, okay, well, you still have a human singer, but nowadays we don't even have that sometimes.
Well, I think that's the problem in modern music sometimes, is it's too easy to digitally fix everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes you shouldn't be fixing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sounds better if you, or especially if you're cutting and pasting something.
Yeah.
If you take to like once and then you're paste it on 10 more times, so it's identical.
Yep.
That's not good.
I
mean, I remember Randy Rhoads talking about how on the solos, he would double track them or even triple track the stuff.
Yeah.
But he'd be playing them live, and he said the why it gives a fuller sound is because it's never exactly the same.
Right.
So a note would hit here, and the other note would hit slightly in front or behind it,
Yep.
which makes the whole note sound bigger. If they hit exactly the same, then double tracking doesn't help you any.
It basically cancels itself out.
Right. Just it's the same thing.
I was recording once, and I learned this through recording. And I took my track, because this is when we had a program called Paris. It was like Pro Tools, but I took the track and I copied it. So I had two of the exact same tracks.
Yeah.
And I panned them, and I thought, this is going to sound huge.
Yeah.
And it sounded exactly the same.
Right.
And my friend's like, that's because you have what's called big mono now. You took the same thing and moved, at least move it forward a little bit or retrack it.
Right.
Ideally, retrack it again. And that's when I learned the power of that.
Yeah.
Because I retracked the same solo, then I panned it, and it was huge. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
see, you need those variations and frequencies to.
Right. And a lot of those bands too back then would play when they're double tracking with a different amp, different guitar
Yeah,
too, so you
exactly.
get different tone.
I do that to this day. That's why I have those three amps
Yeah.
over there. It's like, take one, then move the mics over. It's a whole
Right.
different feel.
Yeah, but I think too much now people just fix everything and everything's just perfect, and it's like that's
Sterile.
yeah,
sometimes.
it doesn't sound real. Plus, you go live and you can't play it.
Yeah. They have a pedal. I forgot what it's called now. I forgot. I gave it to my friend because he ditto. No, it's not a ditto pedal. But it'll take whatever you play, it'll split it into 3 parts.
Sure.
And it varies the other parts somehow.
Okay,
and
sure.
it sounds really big. So they're finding a way around it. But
Yeah.
still, there's something about even 2 different players playing the same thing that can vary it.
And honestly, that's part of why I do my videos in a single take. It's not always the first take, but in a single take, because I want people to know that, yes, I might make a mistake occasionally in it, but this is me really playing it. If you practice it, you can do this. I'm not cutting and pasting 10 different takes into one, and I never can actually play the part. You know? So
those composite solos get a little weird if they get overboard, for sure.
Right. So if I'm teaching something, I want people to know that, you can really do this yourself. You might have to put a lot of practice in, but it's doable.
A lot of YouTube guitar players are getting busted now because they're being shown to have faked what they did.
Sure.
Sometimes it's really obvious. You could tell because their finger moves before the note, moves. But it's like, I try to stay true to myself, but I will do a solo like 5 times and choose the best one sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes I get really lucky and I'm just like, oh, okay, that worked. But it just depends how honest you are about it.
Right. Right. And there's nothing wrong with editing. I mostly do it both for that, but also because I just hate editing.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And I like practicing. Since I'm not making money off this, why would I do something I don't like?
Yeah.
When I'd rather practice it for 5 hours and get good than spend a couple hours editing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's another thing about your style. Your style feels very like you're in person. You're doing everything in real time.
Yeah.
My videos, I cut a lot. I do rough cuts because
yours are more professional.
Well, maybe, but it's also because that way I could take it home and still edit. Here, I do it, and if I have all these transitions set, if I bring it home, I can't do those same transitions. Yeah. So if it's like a quick cut, I try not to make it annoying, but sometimes it gets annoying. But I don't know. It's just everybody has a different style.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think your style, like I said, it comes off slicker, which is what most people want. Mine's a little more niche, and that's fine. It's
it's your style.
There's something for everyone,
and it's very comfortable to watch you when you teach. And I could tell you're really comfortable. That's the only critique I was ever going to give you, was that sometimes I could tell you spend a lot of time practicing alone, like in your head, because the way you talk, it's like you're talking to yourself. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, what did you just say? Yeah. I could tell you're talking kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah. Sometimes I get too ahead of myself.
Yeah, I do that too. Like if I really know what I'm saying internally, I'll be like, and then I went to the store and I did this, and I'm like, so people are like, what the hell did you just say? I'm like, it made sense to me.
Well, the hard part is I'm basically doing like a private lesson, but the person can't say, hey, I didn't get what you said. Can you
have to
repeat
rewind
that
it.
a different way?
Exactly.
On it?
Yeah.
Because I don't work off a script. I go through it in my head ahead of time, knowing what points I want to hit, but then the talking's improvised too. It's
all real.
So it's me just saying some ideas and playing some ideas, and
I love it. I have little points that I want to do. Like I'll say, be sure to talk about Paul Gilbert.
I do.
But then I'll expand on it, and that's all real. And then I'll look down, because I don't like it when singers read off iPads on stage unless they have to. But it's just like mechanical. So I don't. Every time I watch a video and I can tell somebody's reading a teleprompter, it's really weird.
Right. yeah, it just doesn't feel natural. And if you know the material, you should be able to just describe it on it. My fear is that I'll miss something that I want to say, so I'll sometimes do an outline with main points and occasionally look over that. But if it's something I've taught for a while, like something more beginner intermediate, I don't even do that. I just do it like I would if it's a lesson. And
it does suck when you get done with it. You watch it back and you go, "Oh, I forgot to mention this really important thing." So what I do now is I'll put graphics on screen.
Sure.
And I'll re-record a vocal, like some sort of dialogue that I forgot, and then I'll come back to the real video. So it's my way of cheating around.
Yeah, and I probably should do it. If I miss a main point, I just go like, okay, I'm gonna re-record the whole video.
Gotta spend another half hour here. Well, I was gonna say, when you reach a certain point where you're being monetized and this becomes like a money-making thing for you, are you gonna change anything up?
Probably not. Because I'm doing this the way I want to do it, and I think I'm helping people and I'm helping myself on. So I'm not going to chase after views that much. I mean, I want to do stuff that people want to watch. So it's not that I want to do niche stuff, but I have to be true to myself too on it. And so I'm definitely not going to be teaching some, clickbaity type thing or teaching things that aren't true to what I want to do. I'm not going to start teaching a bunch of cover songs and stuff like that.
You're not going to look at what's hot for the week. And
right.
It's funny how you're the opposite of that, whereas some people go into the space going, this is how you fool the system. Yeah. You take whatever's hot this week, you do some take on it. You might not even be talking the truth because you just want to get the craziest take and then get controversy, and that's when you get comments. And I think I'm true to myself because I never do anything. That's why I never do like paid ads. Like I always get people who want me to push their stuff. And the only way I would ever do that is if I actually use their product and liked it. And this is me saying this at this level because I don't know what it's like to, pull in so much that I have to keep a machine running. I know they have to sometimes get into product stuff to just keep afloat. But for me, it's like, I'm lucky enough to be able to be like, you know what? I actually love this Boss pedal. I'm just going to do it for free. I'm going to promote it just because I love it.
Right.
So it's just like, if someone's paying you, suddenly you feel like you have to say good things.
Some extent, you potentially are wearing away the trust of your audience. Because if they know you're being paid to do this, the question in the back of their head is, does he even like this? Is he pushing a product just because he's making money off it? With you, people know that he actually likes it. That's why he's pushing it. It's not just something to make a buck. I don't want my audience to question my motives either. I'm here to do something that I think people will be interested in. If they aren't interested, that's fine. Not everything's for everyone.
You want to attract the right audience.
Right.
The hardest part is when you do something that's outside of what you want to do and you get a bunch of people, all of a sudden you feel like it's called audience capture. Mm-hmm. Suddenly you have to do like Megadeth videos for the rest of your life.
Right, exactly. And I find that, and this is frustrating, but I find that the videos where I just talk, I get more views than the ones where I actually teach something.
So it'll happen too,
and it's like, I get it because it's a more broad audience. You're not getting someone who just wants to learn this niche arpeggio. You're getting someone, a general conversation, but you can dip your toe on that if you're really interested in it. I do, and I if it's a subject that I care about, then I'll talk about it. Like I did a video talking about, is the 10,000 hours thing a real thing? Because I wanted to talk about, it's not just hours, it's the quality of your practice, and all these other factors play such a role. And that jumped up to like my number 4th video in like a very short time. It's
it's a good topic because it makes people. You get two sides: people that are dedicated that want to do the 10,000 hours. Because when I read Outliers, I was practicing way more too. It's like I want to be like the Beatles, and practicing like 8 hours a day or whatever. And then you get the people that want to get off easy and go, maybe he's going to tell me I don't have to practice that much and I could be lazy. Well, so you get both sides.
Yeah, but the thing is, in my opinion, the quality of your practice makes way more difference than the volume of it. If you are doing the same thing all the time and not challenging yourself, even after 10,000 hours, you're not going to be very good. I've had students come to me that have been playing decades and they're still at your intermediate level. Because, as you get more advanced, things get easier that you used to play. And if you then stop at some point and just play what's easy for you, you're never going to progress at that point. You have to keep challenging yourself, and keep trying stuff that's still hard for you, or where you're making mistakes, which is uncomfortable.
Or go deeper into what you thought you already knew. Right. That's what I love to do.
Yeah. And that's something I've talked about in videos too, where you challenge yourself either by understanding what you're doing currently better and new ways to do it, or by learning something new.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be, you can work on improving your technique. You can work on different ways to use the knowledge, the things you already know, or you can learn something brand new. But you have to challenge yourself some way or another. Otherwise, you're not progressing.
I just think too many people like myself, like I use myself in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world as an example of what not to do.
Sure.
I piled knowledge on knowledge on knowledge. I bought book after book. I ordered DVD after DVD. But with guitar, well, by the way, I didn't get really good at Jiu-Jitsu. I didn't get to purple belt until I went back to basics and just did what my teacher taught me. And worked on one thing for like a month straight. I was like, this month is mount.
Yeah.
If I could hold the mount for, for this entire month, if I just work on that. And I joined this one website that just taught the basics, like in depth. And I thought that's why my first biggest videos were levels videos, because there's levels to everything. So you could get on top of somebody. That's level 1. Level 2, can you keep them down for more than 10 seconds? 3, can you force them to make a mistake in escaping so you can get a submission? There's all these levels.
Honestly, any complex skill, fundamentals are the most important. And that's, what I practice. That's what I stress with students, that, it's that picking, it's your hand technique, it's your relaxation, it's all these fundamentals on it. And then it's what you do with it, because it doesn't matter how many things, too many traditional martial arts, especially get into memorizing lots of techniques and forms and all this, but they don't learn how to actually apply it outside of the one context. So same thing with guitar or martial arts. If you learn a bunch of stuff but can't apply any of it, it's worthless to you.
It's just floating in your head.
You can know 100 licks. There's this saying that I'd rather know 10 licks that I can do 100 ways than 100 different licks.
That goes back to what Bruce Lee, like 10 kicks versus 100 different types of kicks.
Yeah, right. Just doing the same thing over and over. You get really good with that. But, if you have a lick and you can play it a dozen different ways, in different situations and variations, you can use it a lot more than if you learn 10 different licks that each only work in one situation.
Definitely. Yeah. So I like that.
So
concepts. It goes back to concepts like zooming back a little bit and seeing the bigger picture. Because I used to be if his hand is here and this is here, then I do this. You get trapped and you sort of like paralyze yourself in certain situations because you're supposed to do something and you just lock up. But if the concept is have an underhook here, that can cover so many different things. That can get you out of a lot of trouble. So
also you get all that rote memorization of he does A, I do B, he does C, I do D. Because people get locked into that mindset, and then it's hard to break out of that if you don't get the expected response.
Right.
And then suddenly it's like you freeze up. Well, he didn't do what he's supposed to do next.
It's like someone attacks you on the street with a knife and you're like, you're supposed to come at me like this. What are
no
you doing?
thrusting. We didn't cover that.
I learned that. I remember I was laughing because we did a little knife defense in my school and I like laughed because the teacher even laughed because he's like, go home and watch this video of this guy like slashing a big slab of meat. Right. And the guy is like, like, oh my God. There's no way to defend that. I'm like, first of all, throw a chair at the guy and run away. That's my favorite thing is like when one time in class we just had red markers. So we're like, now attack me. We're all dead. It's like we would all have been dead. So it's just like in magazines and books, it was always do this figure 1, figure 2, and you think you're good because you memorized that. But in a real situation,
well, you have to practice with variables. If you're doing a martial arts technique, you have to have an opponent who's willing to do something different. So you have choice drills where you have multiple options that the person can do, and you gradually build that into more and more towards more just freestyle on it. And guitar's the same way. You need to not be, well, this chord plays, I always play this note, because you get into this trap of you just sound boring. It's
almost like binary thinking. It's just like off on. It's like, no, I want to have another option after that.
And that's where I get frustrated with people who say, well, this is more emotional playing than this. It's like that person's just doing the rote things that they've done 1,000 times. It might sound emotional to you because of how you interpret it, but they're just going through the motions. They're not playing with emotion. You can play with emotion at any speed, any genre. It's what you're putting into it.
True.
Just people interpret things that sound like a voice as emotion, bends, vibratos, and stuff like that. But all classical music, the greats all had slow and fast passages.
There's no vibrato in piano. So it's like, and you get emotional with that.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. And everything has, balanced music has both fast and slow parts. the fast parts aren't lacking emotion, and the slow parts have emotion. They all do.
Yeah.
It's just what you put into it.
Well, plus being human, you could attach any emotion to almost any stimulus. So
Right.
it's like you could listen to death metal and feel terrible because during your life you listen to a lot of death metal during a bad time.
Right, you're bringing your own concepts
Projecting.
into it. Yeah, exactly. So someone might just have a great emotional response to a certain music because of past memories, or just because they just love that style.
Right.
They hear this death metal and it's like that invigorates them, while other people are like, it just gives me a headache.
Right.
You
I can't understand the lyrics.
Yeah.
But the first time I heard Carcass, this is funny because I was never a death metal guy.
Yeah.
I was always like a heavy metal guy.
Sure.
Grew up on like Priest and Maiden. And then
same here.
Took the leap to Metallica and Megadeth and all that.
Yeah.
Pantera after that. But then somebody loaned me Heartwork by Carcass. And I remember I played it as I dozed off to sleep.
Yeah.
And I was so cozy in my bed that day. It was really cold outside and I was like in this nice warm bed. So every time I hear that album, I feel really good. Yeah. And I'm like feeling great listening to Carcass, and everyone else is like, "This is insane stuff."
Yeah, and you can, if you expose yourself to different things and give it a chance. The hard part is if you only hear something once, a lot of times you'll form an opinion and you won't get a chance to really grow to enjoy it. Some of the experimental stuff I listen to, the first time I hear it, it's like, it's interesting, but I don't know if I like it that much. But then I listen to it a few times, like, I keep hearing something new every time I hear it.
And, there's layers to it.
And I really like it.
But to do a video on that, actually, the good old days of, like we were talking about, this is coming full circle, forced to buy a full album just because of one song you like, until they started coming out with singles a little bit more. Even back in the early days, they had single records, the little 45s.
Right, exactly.
But when we got older, we had to buy the full cassettes for a long time, the full CDs, and they had CD singles, they had cassette singles. It always felt weird to buy a cassette single because you had like one song on each side. So I had like the one cassette with like Bread Fan or something, or the Prince on the other side. But it got to the point where it's like I was forced to listen to the 6th track on this album, and I hated it at first. I would skip it to get to the next tune. Sure. And then over time, I heard like the tail end of it. I'm like, that's actually kind of cool. And then I go back, and eventually it became one of my favorite tunes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of like in pop. What's successful is what's simple, because the first time you hear it, you can catch it, you can understand it, you can like it.
It's like sugar.
Yeah, the more complex something, the more you have to develop a taste for it. It's like eating hot sauce or something. If you've never eaten something hot, it can be pretty mild and you think it's hot, but gradually you get more tolerance to it.
That's true.
In music, you get more tolerance to those discordant notes, the flat fives and stuff like that, and that starts sounding good to you, and you want more of that. And that's where some of the styles, that gets way out there, have kind of gone to a point where most people can't handle it because
it's just the whole time.
Yeah, it's like eating the super hot stuff that almost no one else can handle.
It's a good way to put it.
They just develop that tolerance over time to where now this outside jazz stuff is just like, is that even music? Because it's just gotten so far.
It just got so wacky. I went full circle on that because I remember getting into Dream Theater. Yeah. And that was my way, because I was never a huge Rush guy early on. Sure. Dream Theater was my way into that world. And then I got into like Cynic. I got into a whole bunch of real technical bands. Yeah. It got really crazy, and then I found my way back to simple. So it's like I went full circle, and I still appreciate it. But my favorite Dream Theater albums are their first 3 albums. It's like people want me to hear the new stuff, and I like it, but it's just not the same to me. It doesn't have that cohesiveness of song like it used to.
And see, I got into that stuff late because of my cheapness. When the Dream Theater came out, Pull Me Under was on the radio. I was like, that's a cool song.
Is that cool that was a big hit on the radio?
Right. But I never went out and bought the records. Yeah. So it wasn't until I started doing streaming that then, listening to streaming that I started then listening to it. And then it's like going through, on Spotify, they got all these CDs. So I've got to listen to all these CDs.
So how long did it take you to finally hear Metropolis?
I don't know, but it was within the past, 10 years.
That blows my mind.
So a lot of these older bands, right now I'm listening to a lot of Dream Theater, a lot of Symphony X, a lot of Nevermore, and stuff that
you get their whole
all came out
a
long time ago. But
for $11 a month.
But at the time I wasn't really listening to them. Because, so I was missing out then, but now I have all this music I haven't touched.
It's our, we're lucky because in our generation we went from having nothing to like everything. So we get both worlds.
Right.
So I think we appreciate it. But man, the first time I heard Pull Me Under, I demanded my drummer drive me to Tidal Wave. Do you remember Tidal Wave?
Yeah.
I bought the cassette for Images and Words, and it's all we listened to for like 3 months straight. I bought the book. I learned the solo to Under a Glass Moon, and that was my
Yep.
biggest
Yep.
achievement. And I thought I could play anything now. Little did I know, But it is an incredible solo. So it's so crazy that you've recently heard all that stuff.
Yeah,
I love that.
right. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff I didn't get into till late.
So you must feel like a kid in Christmas every time you like.
Yeah, I'm always trying to find new bands that maybe have been out for 20, 30 years and I just never discovered until now.
Well, I'm still doing that too with like old Rush albums. I'm like, I never really listened to the whole thing. Like I listened to maybe half of it. Yeah. But now I'm listening to like the side B of these albums.
Or some of the foreign stuff. A band I've been listening to recently is Gonanish, which is a experimental metal, death metal.
Oh, death
metal? Well, it mixes with jazz, experimental, everything. It's just weird, but I really like it.
Like Mr. Bungle weird?
Well, it's got like piano and a couple guitars. It's got some like more melodic singing and some more death metal, like screaming and stuff all mixed together. So, unfortunately, Spotify only has one of their records, but you can find other ones on YouTube
or
and stuff.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
But yeah, so I'm finding these things and, that I would never follow because it's such these abstract things, but because I would listen to weird stuff, occasionally Spotify will put in my recommended, and it's like I try it out. It's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, the only problem with that is with people that maybe aren't our generation. They listen to like 5 seconds and they just say, I hate it or whatever. Yeah. But you're right. You have to let things grow on you sometimes.
Right. I mean, yeah, some of this stuff, especially the more out there stuff, you have to be in the right mood and you have to kind of let it grow on you. I mean, if you're not in the mood for something like that, it's probably just going to give you a headache.
Yeah, that's true. It does. I think there's like chemistry in us that like is attracted to certain frequencies like right away. And then we have to bend our minds a little bit to get into the newer stuff. Yeah. Because I used to hate the sound of anything that was not just diatonic for a long time. Yeah. Because I grew up on like Kiss and stuff. Yeah. So it's like I was used to real like grungy rock, but when it came to like jazz chords, it took me forever to accept it and to actually love it.
I was kind of the same way when I went through JIT, because I was so busy memorizing all these scales, arpeggios, and all this stuff that I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to put outside notes. I wanted to, because I was so focused, I have to stay in these. I want to, I maybe change keys, but I'm still going to stay in whatever key I'm currently in. So it took me a while before I was like, okay, it's kind of cool to add a note outside here. And
I joined a band once where the singer wanted me to play outside all the time, to the point where he took a mic stand, he like scraped it against my strings. He's like, just go crazy. And I couldn't. I was so locked into what was right. And then one day I just decided to just play all the wrong notes just on my own, just practicing. And I'm like, I'm just going to be a half step up for a second and get used to the sound of it. And then later I implemented it into my style a little bit more. Right.
Well, and a good way to do that too is play a key you're really never playing. And you're probably going to make mistakes even if you're trying to stay in. Totally. And then you'll be like, hey, that actually sounded good. Yeah. I did
something sort of original there. Wow. That's crazy.
So you find things by accident on that.
I love that. Those are the serendipitous moments. Yeah. I don't know what the word is there, but
I know what you mean.
I love it. So what are your plans now for the channel? Is it just to keep growing until you're monetized? And then
I mean, I'm not, of course I'd like that to happen sooner than later, but it's been so long.
Well, you hit 1,000, right?
Yeah. So it's been so long that I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if I hit the 4,000 hours, that's great. If some people want to check out, I've got a ton of videos. So, if people go back and check out some of the old videos, I can maybe hit that at some point. But I'll just keep making stuff and, hopefully someday it'll happen. But either way, I'll keep making stuff.
I love it. Yeah. You're like me. I think no matter what, you'll still keep going.
Yeah. Because, I want to help people. But also, like I said, it helps me. It gives me a focus. It forces me to do things that I wouldn't normally play. Yep. To think outside the box on the things that I've done, kind of wrote myself for many years, same arpeggio fingers, same scale fingers. Like, okay, how can I do this in a different way? Yep. That's, like one of the most recent videos I did, I purposely did a solo where I was thinking, I'm not going to think what key I'm in. I'm going to purposely combine like bitonal arpeggios are not in the same key. So I started off by playing like a F minor major 7 going to F major 7 within a 2-octave frame on it. So nice. I was purposely saying, okay, I'm not going to go into what I would normally do or would be expected on.
Not going to box yourself in.
Yeah, I'm not just going to play that triad or that 7th arpeggio or something like that.
Getting outside your comfort zone.
Right, and just not worrying about it, too. Just not thinking about, okay, and then later on, when I was tabbing it out, it's like, okay, then I start seeing, okay, I was in this key for this section, I was in this key, and but
so work it out later.
Right, figure out what I actually did after the fact, but
I like that.
Not plan it ahead, because normally I always know what key I'm in and things like that, and that can be restraining to some extent.
It's almost like speaking in tongues but guitar playing. Just let it all out, see what happens. I did that one time. I put on a little Miles Davis Bitches Brew.
Yeah.
And I just went I went to another world. I was like, I don't know. I got into a trance, and I just started playing whatever I felt. Some of it was really weird. Some of it was cool. I listened back, and then it's like, wow, I should do this more often. It's a good creative exercise.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot. I usually write from improvisation. So, I'll create a rough draft of different ideas, and then just start mixing and matching and changing them. So, I maybe write 3-4 pages of licks, and I edit it down to 1 page.
Oh, cool.
And they, if you look at my rough drafts, it'll be these little licks with the arrows going all over which way and stuff crossed out.
It's like a crazy man driving a conspiracy theory out.
This, down to this, over to this.
Well, nowadays with just Pro Tools, it's so easy to just block. That's why for a while everything sounded so blocked off and quantized.
Yeah.
Because you could just take this idea and move it over here. But it goes as far back as splicing tape. I guess that's how Rush wrote a lot of their solos. Is Geddy Lee would cut up Alex's solos and put it together and be like, there's your solo.
Yeah.
So.
I just use pen and paper still.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I'm playing, I just want to grab and write down.
Yep.
I don't want to have to open a program or something like that.
You sound like my friend John, who drove himself crazy because he, not really, but he wanted to be creative, but he was also trying to learn these programs. And every time he would get an idea, by the time he got it out, he was already, it was lost because he had to remember all these buttons to push.
I just want to scratch something down quick, to set down, play the next thing, and
I just hit record on my phone and I hopefully capture it. I hate it when you think you're going to remember something, the next day it's gone,
Yeah, I'm big on writing anything that I think sounds good down. I honestly, a lot of it I never go back to. I've got boxes of licks and stuff that I never
We're all going to die with all these ideas just floating around.
Right. But at least you have it there. I think writing it down helps cement it in your brain too, because you know exactly what you did if you have to write it out.
That's true.
If you just play it, you maybe don't really know what you played. You have to sit there and go, okay, I hit this note twice. I slid here. And
you got to transcribe yourself, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
I go in these phases where I'll just write 10 songs and I'll just have to try to record it. But I'll wake up with an idea and I'll go back to sleep thinking I'll remember it. And it always goes away. Creativity is very slippery.
Yeah, I know myself well enough to know that I will forget it if I don't write it down right then on it. Because
it's good you're able to write things down too.
Yeah, because even 10 minutes later, I'm probably going to forget it unless I'm still working on it.
Especially with our ADD minds or whatever we have, I think we both share whatever that is. Yeah. A lot of people are like, are you autistic or something? I'm like, maybe. I'm not going to, back when I was younger, they never diagnosed that for people. So I could focus on a guitar part for 8 hours straight.
Yeah.
That can't be real. That can't be good, normal.
Yeah. And, for me, when I record a video, then it's okay, I'm done with that. It goes out of my mind.
Yeah.
A week later, I might not even remember why I
That's
did
crazy. You watch your videos I actually did that?
Well, it's like licks and stuff. If I write a lick, it's and then the student asked me a week or two later to play it. It's well, let me look at my tab.
Yeah. Because, what did I do?
Even though I had memorized well enough I could play it without mistakes, I haven't touched it since.
That's amazing. It's like somebody else wrote it then.
Yeah. Well, it's because, honestly, I lose interest. Once I can play it and I've got it recorded, then it's okay, I'm on to the next lick.
Yeah.
I'm on to new ideas. And
you're very much a creative on your way, what's next?
Yeah, that's what motivates me. And once I've written something, I don't enjoy playing it that much after it's written.
We're the opposite, because I'm so nostalgic. I could play the same old stuff all the time and love it.
Yeah, I always want something new. So improvising is one of my favorite things to do. Just creating something, and then if I get ideas I like, that maybe composes into a piece of some sort.
Are you glad you found music and martial arts? Because if we didn't have that, I think we would be very destructive. I'm very eclectic, but I also get very addicted to things. So for me to get addicted to scale patterns versus math or something.
Yeah, I'm obsessive on things too. So I think you kind of have to have that mindset to some extent to really get into some of that technical stuff, because you have to have the patience of not having to force yourself to do that, but actually kind of enjoying just getting into that. And for me, when I was at GIT, it was almost like meditation, doing these things on it. I was relaxing and I just focused so much on that you let everything else go.
Yep.
You're not thinking about any troubles or worries about, money or any of that stuff.
Everything else goes away. Yeah.
You're just focused on the music. And I think the more I'm doing that, I find I'm calmer as a person.
Yeah.
And my mental state's better than if I wasn't doing that.
Because otherwise you're just like a beam of light going in many directions.
Yeah.
You just focus it. Like
right.
in jiu-jitsu, when you're on the ground and someone's trying to choke you, you're not thinking of anything else. And it really does bring you to some weird peace.
Yeah. Right. And, you can lose yourself doing stuff like watching TV or playing music, but it's not the same as actually doing it yourself.
Yeah.
I think you need something that's interactive in your brain. If you're just absorbing stuff, you don't feel good afterwards. In my opinion,
a hollow. It's like eating like junk food.
Right.
It's not the same
Right.
fulfillment.
You don't feel good afterwards. It's like, was I just kind of wasting my day?
That's why VR is so dangerous, because I have one of those headsets, Oculus, and I'm literally like playing this is what got me through COVID. I'd play table tennis against like people in China in the middle of the night. And you're doing it, so you feel like it's real. It's not real, but it kind of is. Your brain thinks it's real. It's like a Matrix type thing. And so I'm like, I could easily get lost in those worlds.
And, I like video games. I like movies. I like all that stuff. So it's not that I don't do that stuff, but, it's different.
It's like, have you ever tried like Rocksmith or any of those video game guitar?
No, I haven't. Like Guitar Hero and stuff. I've never.
I tried it. Like
that stuff.
Guitar Hero was for like the first couple were just fun, and you're hitting 5 plastic buttons and stuff. But when it got to the point where it was teaching you, and I tried to do it, and it scrolls across, and I get dizzy, and then I forget if it's not in front of me. I just lost interest really quick in that stuff.
Yeah,
but I thought it was going to take over my job.
Right, and for me, I just feel like I could just be playing guitar.
Yeah, I could just be doing the real thing.
I mean, I like playing video games, but if I'm going to play guitar, I want to play guitar. If I'm doing a video game, I may be doing action or role playing or something like that video game. But
I'd rather do that than try to play guitar through that.
Yeah, it was good for lessons for me though. A lot of people came in wanting to play the songs they played on Guitar Hero.
Yes, Guitar Hero was huge for that. Same with movies like School of Rock brought in a lot of people.
Exactly.
But the crazy thing is that I tried the real Rocksmith lessons, and I realized that, my student came in one day and he was so jacked about it. He's like, dude, I'm like playing more than ever. I'm like, cool. I'm like, show me what you're learning. And he goes, I can't really play it unless it's on the screen. And I go, see, that's the difference. I don't want to go down that road. Yeah, I don't want to be beholden to a screen in front of me, as I have a screen in front of me here.
Well, and I think sometimes that's the issue too with so much of the stuff is gotten offline, online. I mean, you're getting information on it. It's easy to get distracted and not practice in, because you turn on a video, you turn on stuff,
That's
which
true.
we both make videos, but pick up your guitar,
Yeah.
play while you're watching the video, or stop the video and practice the things as you're doing it, because otherwise it becomes this rabbit hole where you watch videos all night and you didn't practice at all.
That's a great point. Like they might think, because I watched it, I sort of practiced it in my head, but it's got to be in your hands.
Well, especially if you go to another video right after it.
Yeah.
The first video is disappearing.
Right. It's gone.
You're forgetting that, and you've never applied it. It's again that you have to apply the knowledge.
Yep.
And if plus you can do simple things like technique exercises while you're listening.
Yep.
Do the stuff that you need repetition. That's just rote. You don't have to think about too much.
Yep.
That you kind of have down while you're watching. It's complex stuff. Yeah, you can't do that and actually pay attention to both. But there's always things you need reps on.
That's how I learned legato. I just would do a pattern and watch TV.
Yeah.
Diddle, diddle, diddle,
Me too.
diddle. Yep.
And a lot of times I'd watch like foreign action movies. I'd be reading the subtitles while I'm practicing.
That's funny. Every part of your brain is lit up.
Yeah,
it's like doing 5 things at once.
Right. Watching TV, reading subtitles, practicing scales.
Yeah. But what it helped with was when I was on stage and like I was distracted by the audience, I was still automatically playing. So.
Right. Because you're playing without thinking.
Right.
So you're playing relaxed and not stressing about it too much. As long as you're not making tons of mistakes, if you're playing something that's within your playing ability, go slow.
Yep.
Do a speed where you can do it without mistakes. And that gives you your reps without you having to kill yourself doing just reps staring at a wall.
Yeah, exactly. So. Which I would have done back in the day, but I'm glad I was able to like change it up to make it somewhat fun.
Yeah.
For a while, I didn't care about fun. I just wanted to get good. I was burning desire just to get really good. Yeah. And with people like you in my life, helped me get there so much quicker, and I appreciate it. You know, so.
Yeah.
So thank you for the full circle thing. Selling me the guitar of my dreams.
Yeah. They got me my next guitar too by doing
there you go.
So
it all works out. It's funny how life works out.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, anything you want to tell everybody before like your channel and all that stuff? I'm hoping all this recorded.
Yeah, just check it out. They've got videos on so many different subjects, over 160 videos, put out new ones. So, check out some of the old videos. A lot of people never go beyond what's currently out.
Isn't that sad? Because you put a lot of work into those.
Well, and not just that, but what's currently out might not be what you really need.
Yeah.
It might be some advanced thing. Well, you need a more fundamental or basic thing. So go back to the stuff that actually is appropriate for what you want to learn, not just whatever's new on it.
We're it's like Netflix. We always want the next new, series to come out.
Right.
What I've been doing, though, is I've been sort of hacking the system a little bit. I've been going back to my old videos that I thought were really cool that never really got attention.
Yeah.
And I'm putting them out as shorts, and they're getting new life.
I've done that in some of mine, too. I mean, I remember I did this one video that did nothing. It was on like alternating thirds, doing like fast scale runs and putting in scale runs. Yeah. It actually got -1 subscriber on it.
Oh God!
and less than 100 views.
That was me. I had to subscribe. Yeah. That's crazy.
But then I put out a short. It got like 500 views and like 5-6 subscribers off the short, which was just playing the lick on the short. But the video that played the lick and then taught how to do it and taught other exercises got no views. It's like,
that's YouTube. You never know.
It's like, come on. This is the clip of our video.
I put out a little short of me doing, I think it was Paradise City or something. Yeah. And people are like, whoa, that's crazy. But, what did they say? They said something like, somebody just put a video out the other day about it. I'm like, yeah, but I did this 5 years ago. It's like sometimes, it's like your timing can be a little bit weird, but the lesson is still there.
Yeah, you can't worry about what other people are doing because people are always putting out stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to do what you do and...
Because
most of the stuff, if you're doing, you've probably known it for years. It's not like you're copying this other guy who just put out last week and I'm going to make a video now on that.
That's the frustrating part is that they're like, oh, you're totally copying this dude. I'm like, well, okay, look at the date, but I have nothing to prove anymore. I used to worry about that stuff a lot.
Right. Yeah, I don't worry about that. I remember... kind of funny story. Back when it was still just magazines and stuff, I was doing it. I got back from GAT and did all the normal scales and stuff, arpeggios and stuff, and came up with this kind of unique sounding arpeggio. I thought that was like stacking fifths and stuff on it. And I came up with this new idea. This is cool. And then like 6 months later, Joe Satriani wrote the same sort of lick in a column.
No.
And like if I ever play this, they're just gonna say I ripped him off.
Oh no, that sucks.
Because, who's gonna believe that I actually came up with this and then saw it?
That sucks, man. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about that.
It's like, oh well.
It's the same with like even songs and melodies. Like I think Satriani sued Coldplay or vice versa. I'm not sure, but it's like you write something and somebody else beats it to it, or they just have the bigger name, so they get it heard first. So
but so often it's like you probably have both been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
There's only so many ways you can play music.
I know.
So everyone's going to come up with the same ideas. You see the same thing in martial arts. You see in like historical European martial arts from like 1500s, throws there in judo and stuff. They weren't stealing it from Japan in 1500s. It's just the body only moves so many ways.
Yeah, what's the saying? Nothing new under the sun.
Right.
I go back, I think, that twister is pretty weird. Then you go back and you see some old judo guy doing it. You're like, oh, shit. Right. You're just giving it maybe a different name now, or a different setup, but it's still the same concept.
Yeah, one of my instructors said the sun shines in every country. So every country is going to develop similar ideas. There's still, you're working from the same human body.
Until we grow another limb somehow.
Yeah, so you're not necessarily ripping something off just because you came up with the same idea someone else came up with somewhere around the world.
That's why I'm really careful of saying like, hey, I came up with this because
I mean, you maybe came up with it for you. Doesn't mean you aren't reinventing the wheel and someone else did it 100 times.
Totally. My whole series about Fix This Band, I'm just doing what I do and what a lot of people do when they see a live band just in their head. Yeah. Like, oh, that bass player's out of tune or something. Yeah. It's like I'm just saying it out loud. Right. So everything's reinvented.
Well, and this is something you've probably run into. I've had students say, oh, you sound just like this guitarist. And it's like, I've never heard that guitarist.
Yeah. So he sounds like me.
You're just filtering it through the eyes of the beholder. Yeah. This is the closest thing that you've heard before to what I'm doing. Yeah. So you think I sound like that, but
you only have the references, right? So I would say there's people doing very interesting things that maybe I haven't heard much in the past. Maybe certain guitar players that break rules or whatever. Yeah. But then they always seem to just admit that they just got it from. It's just a culmination of things that they know.
Everything just evolves from. You create things from your own experiences. So if it looks like something new, it's probably because you took something from jazz and put it into metal or classical into
like Steely Dan probably already did it,
Right. Well, or it's just done in completely different genres. And now, the whole neoclassical metal type stuff was fresh sounding because a lot of the metal players hadn't listened to classical. So you take those ideas and put it in the metal, something sounds new, but it was done hundreds of years ago.
Yep, that's true.
You're just playing an electric guitar now instead of a violin or something like that.
Yeah, you go back and that whole neoclassical phase, I'll never forget how big that got.
Yeah.
It was just like you weren't cool unless you could do, Vivaldi on the guitar. And
well, I love that stuff myself. I mean, that was a big influence.
For a while, everybody wanted to do that. Remember that? They had entire books out, and I think certain artists really took advantage of that in a good way. You know, and then that's weird. When did that phase kind of die off?
Well, and all that stuff died pretty much in the 90s to a large extent.
Okay.
At least, when the grunge came in and all that stuff, at least on the radio. You still had bands putting out stuff, bands I didn't know about at the time until I got streaming service because
they were still there.
They were still there. They just weren't getting a radio airplay on it. So, so it all became kind of buried. People were saying, well, no one does guitar solos anymore. Yeah, you still had people like Symphony X putting out stuff and the Dream Theater putting out stuff. People were doing guitar solos. You just weren't hearing them on the radio.
It just wasn't in the spotlight. I still say grunge was some weird psyop or something. I don't know what happened, but I talk to people. They're just like, next thing you know, you wake up. I remember when the radio stations all changed over and all my friends started wearing like different, flannels and stuff. It's just like, I don't know. It doesn't happen as much these days because everything's so everywhere. But it's like back then we only had certain channels and we copied along.
Right. Well, you had limited sources to pull from. Yeah. You didn't have the online stuff. So if it wasn't on the radio or you spent the money for some record you've never heard, you didn't know it existed necessarily. Or I'd read about something in guitar magazines. And when I used those guitar magazines, I'd play them front to back every song because I'd never heard most of the songs. And it would be like a surprise. It's like, oh, well, this is actually something interesting.
Yep. And we got so much out of magazines. I just can't express it. People get bored now if I talk about a magazine, but it's like, it's like if you're starving and there was an apple, you would eat every bit of that thing. And that's what we did.
Exactly. And a lot of times I never did hear those songs, but I was playing them. I memorized the entire song and it's like, I wonder how close this actually sounds to the original because I've never actually heard the song.
I like that. But, yeah, I think I learned a Steely Dan tune before I ever heard it too. It's like they would just choose a song to do in a magazine. Next thing you know, you're learning these wild chords. It's wow. Yeah. Definitely. So, all right. Well, what's the name of your channel? Just tell everybody.
Easiest way to find it is if you go on YouTube to @Eric Naylor guitar, with no spaces. That'll get it. My channel is actually Guitar Technique and Practice, but if you type that in the search, 50 other channels will come up first.
Guitar Techniques and Practice?
Yeah, it's Guitar Technique and Practice, because everyone has technique or practice in their guitar. So Eric Naylor, guitar, on the search.
I'll put a link to it, too, in the video. Yeah. So sweet. And then a cool shout out to your students' band. Like that.
Yeah, so if you're in the Twin Cities area, check them out. Or go on Spotify. They've got, like I said, his record from when he was 14 is on Spotify. So
that's amazing.
I'm
dying to go see a good death metal show, so maybe I'll check them out.
Yeah, and he took lessons from like 12 to like 18 with me, so long-time student.
Those long-term students, man. It's cool.
Yeah, through the pandemic and everything.
Nice. Stayed true.
Yeah. So,
all right. Well, that was fun. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice being on here.
For sure. Is it a lot more chill than you thought it was going to be? Or?
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect. Yeah. So it's fine. Nothing scary.
We would do this over a coffee too. Yeah. So, okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you later.